The broadcast is live. All right. Tim is out searching for the skunk ape.
The what?
Or maybe it's
I don't know.
for him.
He posted some picture of him on the swamps today, so I assume he's looking for the skunk ape.
Right.
The skunk ape.
What? That's the Bigfoot of the swamps down south. The skunk ape.
I see. Is it? I get it. I take it. It's noisome.
Yes. It's got some sort of scent like a skunk that it can spray at you, but it's like big, like an ape or something.
So it's actually a
hobo.
hobo.
I've heard of it, and I live in the South. So.
You never heard of the skunk ape?
Nope.
You don't watch enough cryptid TV. where they make a show on every crazy cryptid animal that some drunk saw one night.
Right. I love all these people that get addicted to these shows about Bigfoot hunters and paranormal investigations and everything. It's like, you realize if they found something, the show would be over immediately.
What most of the shows, the one I used to have on, well, I never actually watched it. I had it on as background noise, kind of, was Finding Bigfoot. That was the name. I think it went 8 seasons.
Yeah.
And it was people out in the woods having a good time. That's why I kind of liked it. They were and then they're like, and it was always my favorite when they talk about, they had the Bigfoot expert guy who was one of the 4, and he talked about, well, Bigfoot's habits are such and such and such. And it's like, dude, you've never Bigfoot's habits? Come on. you have habits for a creature you've never seen?
Yeah.
My favorite is the I'm all mad that that somebody else stole my idea for a reality show in which they film flat earthers on the search for the edge of the earth. That's another one where you could go like a million seasons where they're like they end one season with everybody on the railing going, I think I see it. I think I see the ice wall at the end of the earth.
Flat earthers do not respond well too when you ask them, well, why, if the earth is a flat plane, why is it night in certain parts and day in other parts?
How do you explain?
And immediately they just lock up. I don't know.
Time zones, eclipses. There are a lot of questions.
Eclipses, yeah, that's it.
Gore Vidal hasn't heard of the skunk ape either. Oh, man, you're not watching the right TV shows either.
Must not be native to Texas.
Yeah.
He also said something about canoeing, and I immediately thought of the movie Deliverance. So.
But I think it's an injustice that Gore Vidal has never heard of the skunk ape. You must talk to your lawyers about it.
Well, the question is, has the skunk ape ever heard of Gore Vidal?
Well, he's heard of the real Gore Vidal. He's got all his books. I'm sure the skunk ape is well read. But our Gore Vidal, I'm not sure. There was one other. I can't remember what it was. I commented on Facebook like 5 years ago. It was some weird reptilian Bigfoot that was somewhere. It was with wings, and it was like, what? Where does this crazy thing come from?
The funny thing is that all of these cryptids are supposedly very large.
Yeah.
And yet you cannot find any evidence that they exist.
Right.
Something as large as a Bigfoot would have to consume a lot of resources, not just for food, but also for shelter.
Right.
And it would take some pretty massive dumps.
Yeah.
So
not only that, but there's never any fossil evidence of any of these creatures.
You would think they'd leave something.
There's never any dead carcasses found anywhere. Never droppings. Never.
Well, the fossils.
Wait a second. With the poop, I beg to differ. There's a cryptid museum up in.
She finds Bigfoot poop all the time.
I'm interested. I want to hear.
I'm just saying that up in Maine they have a cryptid museum.
Right.
And they have a big glass case where there's some moose poop and some deer poop, and then there's Bigfoot poop. So they do have.
And then you have to pay to go see this, right?
There are suggested donations.
Right.
Yeah, matter of fact, Finding Bigfoot, sometimes they found poop that they sent off to the lab. It was never Bigfoot.
And they never discussed the results from the lab, did they?
I watched Below Deck Mediterranean, bravo. My lawyers will be on the case if the Skunk Ape hasn't read Mirror Breckenridge and other classic Vidal books. I don't think I've ever read a Gore Vidal book, though I was just listening to a lecture on The Great Gatsby, and I was like, "Ooh, when's The Great Gatsby issue 2 coming out?" Since I got that first issue, I'm waiting for that second one. I forget what week. Does a bear poop in the woods? Yes. So does a Bigfoot.
Obviously, not a Bigfoot. You know, fossils are not a way to tell if something exists or not, because the normal is for remains to not get fossilized.
Yeah.
And in tropical areas,
right, but
nothing fossilizes.
Even so, you know, there should be some kind of evidence somewhere along the line of evolution that something came to be.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about a 7 or 8 foot primate living in temperate to modestly cold areas, something would fossilize. And since they
Daisy, Mickey, Goofy, and Pluto.
I wonder how much effort Gus puts into that every week. Does he have them written out like weeks in advance, or does he just come up with it on the spot? You know,
I would hope on the spot, because I wouldn't want him to put too much effort into stuff.
Yeah. And as Pluto, I have to say that I declare war on Neil deGrasse Tyson for demoting me.
I'm sure Neil is losing sleep over that as we speak.
Pluto's a planet.
Yeah.
I told people if I ever get another lawnmower, I'm going to name it Cut deGrasse Tyson.
My very educated mother just served us 9. There are no more pickles.
Pickles? I thought it was pizzas.
Pickles is what I learned. Maybe Bigfoot burned their dead.
The Bigfoot funeral pyre.
Well, and I read some big Thanos copter news this afternoon.
Not the Thanos copter.
I've never even heard of Thanos copter until yesterday.
You never heard of the Thanos copter before?
No, I saw somebody post a picture of it on Twitter, and I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, the Thanos copter from the Electric Company Spider-Man comic.
Right, it's from Spidey Super Stories.
I thought it was related to the Jesus copter.
No. It's in Spidey Super Stories, I don't know, number 37, number 39, I forget which issue. And Spidey Super Stories was the book that was tied in with the Electric Company TV show. So it was an easy reading comic book for young kids. Right. So it was like, you know, completely outside of continuity. It was its own little thing in the 70s. And nobody, if you were a comic book fan, you weren't buying Spidey Super Stories. It was for real little kids.
Oh, but that's cute.
Yeah. But one of the things, in one of the issues, they had Thanos show up. And his means of transportation was this helicopter with his name written across the back of. So he's flying around in this helicopter.
Oh, I saw that poster today. That's right. That's what that was.
So, and for years and years and years, it was a joke. And then it really took off in the internet age. The Thanos copter became a meme. But anyway, in this week's Loki, they were in this area that was sort of the end of all time, where they sent people who were from alternate timelines to die, and they had a crashed Thanos copter. So it got news.
We have to start speculating on that issue of Spidey Super Stories, telling people that it's an important key.
Yeah. Out of Spider-Man crime van toys.
I don't know if there's any truth to it or not, but I read somewhere that supposedly who they thought the actor was that played Spidey in those segments on Electric Company was Morgan Freeman.
Oh yeah.
No, he was in it, but he didn't play.
I know he played Easy Reader.
Yeah, Easy Reader.
Yeah.
But if he was in the costume, you wouldn't know.
And it looks like some Gore Vidal is tracking down some people who are stealing the Thanos copter issues. What an interesting characters, yeah. But anyway, Jim Salicrup was the writer of that issue. But just today he revealed that David Anthony Kraft ghost wrote that issue for him. So it's actually David Anthony Kraft who is the creator of the Thanos copter, or at least the writing part of it. Wow. If not the visual. I think the visual was Win Mortimer. Win Mortimer was the artist on it. But because, well, he was credited with the writing on it. So everyone, always said Jim Salicrup always got credit as one of the people who invented the Thanos copter. And he was like, nope. Yeah, I finally can get this off my chest after 37 years or something like that. He's like, it was David Anthony Kraft who came up.
And they're going to have to reboot it, make it some high-tech Airwolf type helicopter.
Oh no, people like their Thanos copter just the way it was.
Oh, gosh.
Do you know that is one of the things that I don't think Gil Kane could draw very well. I forget what issue it was.
It's helicopter.
I was taking a look a couple years ago at some random issue that Gil Kane drew. Whatever. And, Gil Kane can draw the hell out of everything, especially the human body.
Right.
But he had these helicopters in this issue that were probably the worst drawn helicopters I've ever seen. I was just like, and it was that sort of Thanos copter era style of helicopters too, which weren't very pretty to begin with and easy to draw.
It was a Bell helicopter, basically.
Yeah. So, but I was like, wow, there's finally something that Gil Kane can't draw or wasn't interested in drawing. It was those helicopters. Good evening, comic friend.
I always thought that Gil Kane had a hard time drawing horses.
I was just going to mention a lot of artists have a hard time drawing horses.
Yeah.
I was talking with Charles Vess once, and he said some guy was giving him, grief about the way the horse's hooves had left the ground while he drew and he was using a book for reference.
Well, that used to before. That's how Edward Muybridge, who was a pioneering photographer. Yeah. And you can still find his book, his artist reference books, right. Because there was a huge debate back in the day if a horse's hooves left the ground as it ran. Because as you imagine, you can't tell. When all you got is the naked eye and a horse is running 20 miles an hour.
That's how that photo series came out of the running horse.
Yeah, that was a series of photos. Yeah.
Late 1800s, that was Muybridge, and he proved that indeed all four of the horse's hooves leave the ground as it's running. Mm-hmm. So that was a big, huge stuff.
But I've heard more than one artist complain about not liking to draw horses.
Oh yeah. I've heard that from plenty of artists.
Hal Foster.
Maybe. Do you know who was really good at drawing horses? Daisy Line. Paul Becton.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
All drawing horses with the same scope as yeah.
I'm just kind of giggling to myself because I can draw the hell out of horses, but drawing
Paul Becton was a colorist at Marvel, and he was the house colorist when we were there. So he colored books for Marvel freelance, but also in house he colored stuff too and did color corrections. But he would, in his downtime sitting at his desk, he loved old Westerns. He loved Roy Rogers type Westerns. Yeah. And he loved drawing horses. So he'd just occasionally sit there and draw cowboys, and he was good at it. And I was like, wow, you're really good at this. He's like, gets me nothing or something like that. Because, nobody drew horses in comics anymore in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I didn't know that he drew a lot.
We'll be talking about Carmen a little later because that's in my pile here, the last issue. Hello there, Jack Yo. Yeah, but Paul Becton was really good at drawing horses. He's one of really good. He's one of these guys you're like, wow, if only there was some way he could because they were nice. We could make some money because nobody knows he was good at drawing horses.
Usually, if you see horses in a comic, it's either going to be set as a Western or it's going to be set in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Rare that you see them outside of those two.
Right. So all those Western comic artists had to draw horses, which they, may or may not like drawing.
Yep. There's a formula to it, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Which of course I learned at like 8 years old because I was horse crazy. But I picked up my copy of Sleigh Bells.
Oh, I was just reading that before the show. Did you read it?
Not yet. I only just picked it up at like 5. So,
okay.
So I went to go get my pull list today, and I'm very excited to read this. I guess it's somebody kills Rudolph by mistake. Yeah,
someone kills all. Well, they take a shot at all of the reindeer, but then they all end up dying through panic. EC, I don't even know if I know EC's Saddle Justice. Kirby could draw everything. He really could.
And did draw everything. Yes.
Yeah, that just reminded me of the credit of David Anthony Kraft and creating the Thanos copter. I was really annoyed today when I read since it's amazing to me the ebbs and flows of that Loki show. So far, there's 5 out of 6 episodes have run. Like, episode 1 and 2, people were okay with. With episode 3, everybody wanted to abandon the show. They were so mad at it. Episode 4, everybody was okay with it again. And then episode 5 was so filled with Easter eggs that everybody loved it again. But I read an article about the difference, how Loki changed over time, the mythological Loki and the Marvel Comics Loki. And they mentioned the creation of the Marvel Comics Loki without mentioning Jack Kirby. They mentioned Stan Lee and Larry Lieber, no mention of Jack Kirby. I'm like, come on. How can you mention the creation of Loki without mentioning? That's just, the disrespect that artists get in the comic medium sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happens all the time, though. I mean, that's people not giving proper credit where it's due.
Yeah, everyone's raving about episode 5 because of the ton of Easter eggs that's in it. I think that's why everyone loved episode 5. No, I haven't heard anyone talk about anything in it but the Easter eggs. It's kind of crazy.
It's one of the things that make comic book shows. It's so many Easter eggs there, because comic fans, when they watch adaptations, they're not really looking for a good story. We already have the stories in the comics. We just want to see how much from the comics they're using. And since they have to cram a lot into so little time, it's just a matter of, okay, there's an Easter egg. Oh, there's a cameo by whoever. Oh, that car is the car that's driven by J. Jonah Jameson or something. Yeah.
I agree with you, 27. I don't know how in this day and age you could not mention Jack Kirby when mentioning the Marvel Universe. That baffled me when I was reading that. I mean,
even now, still most people know Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby.
But still, when you're writing an article that's referencing 9th and 12th century
mythology
books, you can do a little research to see who created Thor, a Marvel comic book from the 60s, and see Jack Kirby's name there.
They just
I was actually.
For the comic book, they go on Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly. They're just so easy. Most places will give Jack Kirby credit. Any place you will research Thor or Loki these days will give Jack Kirby credit. So how this writer didn't is beyond me. I was just watching. It's a YouTuber who's new to me. but they do history of comics thing. But one of the things they did was, I think this was volume 2 of it too. They were showing all the Jack Kirby precursors to the stuff he worked on in the 60s. So he's showing the Thor precursors, the Fantastic Four precursors, the Spider-Man precursor, even though he didn't, end up doing Spider-Man. He just an interesting video on him going through all the precursors of cosmic rays, making precursors of mutants. So it was really interesting seeing this stuff that Kirby worked on 20 years before that then found fruition in the 60s.
If you look at Challengers of the Unknown, you're like, that's Fantastic Four came from. Yeah,
that was probably the Alex Grant's video for the comic book historians, because he got all the 2-minute videos and spliced them together, and now he has a massive 27-minute video.
Yes, that's the one I was watching. Comic Historians. That was it. He's new to the Comic Historians is new to me. I think. Did you introduce him to me a little? I think you may have mentioned him a little while ago.
I keep mentioning them, and I'm in their Facebook group.
Right. Okay.
So is Bob Beerbohm, always talking about the stuff that is going to put in the book that he's never going to finish writing.
And he has a propensity for pissing people off too.
Yeah, he argues a lot.
Yeah.
He keeps mentioning a guy from the magazine side of Goodman's businesses. That he said, I wrote a lot of those superhero stories, but nobody, not Marie Severin, not John Romita. They don't remember him writing anything for the comics. He may have written something maybe earlier when in the non-credited stuff, but if it's the superheroes, even Stan Lee would have given him credit because he credited Don Rico's pseudonym when he was trying to look for other writers. So, but it's one thing that Beerbohm keeps coming back to. It's that guy whose name I forget. This guy wrote a lot of comics, and there's no evidence for that.
I'm with Vidal, by the way. I'm with Vidal on that thing with the Easter eggs because I don't get them.
I only catch 1 in 10 Easter eggs, but then I read about them afterwards.
I'm not sure what else the term Easter eggs for the movie Alien either.
I enjoy reading about them afterwards, but I don't need to see them. Yeah, the Silver Age Loki was good stuff in that series. Tim is on vacation. He's out celebrating his. He's out in the swamps looking for the skunk ape on his 1-year anniversary. But most Easter eggs go over my head because I'm not looking for them. You ever consider writing about comics? Yeah, he's going to write about comics for our fanzine someday. As soon as he thinks he wants to write about
the fanzine that we're going to publish someday.
And I've got the layout done of it in my first article done. But.
And I was just thinking the ultimate Easter egg series is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Is what?
Is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh yeah, that's nothing but Easter eggs.
Yeah, but Damien saw me last Wednesday when I was on Graphic Man's channel because I had an invite to talk about Asterix.
I just read the first volume of the first book of Asterix that Paper Cuts put out because I went to Hoopla after I watched Paolo on the Asterix show. It's like, you know what? I don't think I've ever read much. I know I've read a little Asterix. I think it's been collected in some books that I've read, but not much. So I went in. I know Paper Cuts has been putting out Asterix volumes.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's see if they're on Hoopla, the library app. And sure enough, there's, I think, 4 volumes. Each has 3 Asterix stories in it. So I read the first one, which I know Paolo said he didn't like the very first Asterix story as much as I don't even know if I don't know what order they're printing them in. So I just read the first one that was in the book.
Yeah, the order was the original order in France was Asterix the Gaul, followed by the Golden Sickle, and the third one was Asterix and the Goths. And the Goths book is the first one that's actually good.
Okay, let me see which one I read. because
it might
but
not
I enjoyed
be
it.
in order, but
Yeah,
it
I
doesn't
don't
matter
know.
if it's in order or not because I've never read Asterix in order. Nobody's ever read Asterix in order.
I'm sure
Unless-
somebody has, but I haven't.
Yeah, if they're 80 years old because they bought the books as they were coming out. But if you are under 50, you've never read Asterix in order. Because you bought one now and then you bought another one later, or you went to the library and read a couple, and it was what's available.
They must be printing them in order because the first one is Asterix the Gaul, then Asterix and the Golden Sickle, then Asterix and the Goths.
All right.
So I've read Asterix the Gaul first. That's the first one you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all right. I mean, I enjoyed it, but
I'm
looking forward to it getting better.
There's a podcast called Pipeline Comics that's run by a guy named Augie DeBleek, which specializes in American views on European comics. And he was talking about how Paper Cuts was doing New English translations of Asterix. And that'd be interesting in comparing them just to see what changes were made.
Yeah, I mean,
from the page that Graphic Man showed me of the Asterix Asterix in Britain, the new version is idiotic.
That's kind of what I was afraid of.
Yeah.
what channel were you on talking about us?
Down. Yeah.
Graphic Man.
Graphic Man was the YouTube channel he was on talking about Asterix.
Have they dumbed down the translation for a modern American audience?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think that was it, but it's simplified, and the page that they showed from Asterix in Britain, the joke is nowhere near as funny.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm gonna. There's 4 Asterix volumes, each with 3 books in them on Hoopla. So I'm probably gonna go through all of them. So I'll keep going and see if I send a link. What link do you want? I've never read the Smurfs. I've only seen like occasional reprintings of the art, like reading some story of it and seeing Smurfs with swords and stuff. I don't think the original French Smurfs have ever been printed over here, as far as I know.
I tried reading the Smurf, but I couldn't stomach Smurf being every other word. It drove me crazy. Also, I think the Smurfs are kind of creepy.
Which Smurfs did Marvel print in 1982?
They printed Smurfs in '82.
Yeah.
If they did, it was a tie-in with the TV show,
Probably.
which is, I think, a totally different type Smurfs. The Brit version of Asterix, that is. I think it was a totally different type Smurfs than the French graphic novels. Paper Cuts prints the Smurfs? Okay, I have not seen them. Okay. I'm only familiar with the Smurf stuff based on a cartoon.
Well, yeah, and I think also, I hate to say this, it's going to sound awful, but with today's audience, once they find out that the only female Smurf was actually created by somebody else, by Papa Smurf, they're not going to like that.
Also, Comic Crack thinks that Paper Cuts is making their own Smurf stuff, so that wouldn't be the original.
Awesome.
All I've seen of the French Smurfs was one time in some article somebody wrote, I don't know, this is 20 years ago, I'm going from memory, was saying how different it was than the original French graphic novels, and they showed pictures of like lots of Smurfs with swords, like having huge battles, which I don't think ever happened in the cartoon.
Right.
Paper Cuts was translated.
One time there were at least 2 giant amusement parks, and neither one of them were in the United States, that were Smurf related, that were as big as anything as Disney ever had. But they've kind of fallen by the wayside now.
Okay.
That'd be creepy to go to an old Smurf amusement park. An old broken down Smurf amusement park.
I just love, like, somebody asks you having a good time, and you just look at the guy and say, Smurf you.
There's my issue of Sleigh Bells from this week. And one thing I wonder what I'm looking. Remember how this red page is wavy. Let me see if I can get that waviness in there.
Oh yeah, it is.
And I'm like, I know that's not oversaturated. That's well below their saturation level of this. Why? I'm thinking this paper modern comics use might be wavy to begin with.
It's either the paper stock or the way that the printer, the actual machinery processes the paper.
But belt buckle. Yeah.
Giant belt buckle.
It's just an awesome thing that he's just
as a production guy, I'm like, why is that wavy? Why is that paper wavy? It shouldn't be. It should only get wavy if it's oversaturated with ink. And I know that is not oversaturated with ink. But still.
Speaking of paper, one of the things I've noticed in my local Barnes & Noble store is the humidity in there is so high that a lot of the paperback covers will curl.
That's interesting too. So I wonder how they store this paper.
Well, yeah, because it's not, on the interior pages, even that have like, big solid bits of ink. It's not.
I think I mentioned this before, but when Jim Steranko used to make the Media Scene Comic Scene magazine in newspaper format, whatever paper stock he used is fantastic because 40-some years later, that stuff is still pristine white.
Yeah. I haven't noticed any warping with other Bad Idea books though, but they're printed at the same place as Marvel and DC, so they're using that same paper stock. More Smurf stuff, the Marvel ones he was talking about. Yeah, I still have never read the Purple Smurfs cartoon made from the Black Smurf strip, renamed in America. Okay. Got a bunch of them when Quacking Duck was 5. Tough to chat and watch. Always a delay in the conversation. Yeah, that's how it goes. Smurfs theme. Where can anyone find this? Maybe that paper is meant to look like wrapping paper.
Yeah, it could be far, far worse to have something stuck in your head than the Smurfs theme. I can think of a couple things, but I will spare you right now unless you make a really bad joke. So.
And I like my one right now. MC Micro G and DJ Sven with Holiday Rep. There, now it's in your head.
Don't know if paper cuts kept me. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of paper cuts, but this was definitely post-apocalyptic week for me in my collection with our DC Go-Go checks up on the top. Which are you guys familiar with the DC Go-Go checks in the mid-60s?
Yep.
Which I recently read someone say something about the reason DC did that was so you could identify their comics right away. And the reason they stopped doing it is because you could identify their comics right away.
That's funny.
Oh.
It's like, but this continues to be good, but I have no idea where it's going. It's just they're just telling a story about this guy, Geiger, who it's kind of like they gave him a superpower. It's the post-apocalypse. There's radiation everywhere, but he's immune to the radiation because of something. And he's got these power rods because he's got and he can take them off, and he's got superpowers, and there's bad guys and good guys. But it's kind of like I don't know how much there is to talk about with Geiger. Jeff Johns, being a huge fan of DC, probably did that on purpose.
I'm just thinking whoever processes those orders at Diamond and puts all those books in the box has got to be called a Geiger counter now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We used to make the same joke about Gary and Don. About Don and Steve Geiger at Marvel.
The only reason I think Geiger has go-go checks is because somebody likes the look. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
There's no thematic reason. Of course, you can. There's like a handful of covers that you can get. I imagine. So if you want to get one without go-go checks, I bet you can. But look at it. It's solidly done. It's it's a well-told story, solidly done. I just have nothing to say about it. It's just kind of like, it feels good too. There's a nice cardstock cover.
Right.
That's always good. And I like this Frazetta-ish cover. Here, let me give you this.
Oh, yeah.
Very Frazetta-ish in its action and modeling.
I'm thinking more Mad Max. But,
oh, it's definitely, the whole book is Mad Max. There's, I mean, the whole post-apocalyptic, there's ton. Matter of fact, they were fighting in cars in this one. So it was very Mad Max. But it's a solid story. I just don't know if it's about anything bigger than guys fighting each other after the apocalypse. There's not even a theme to their apocalypse. Like Nocterra has a theme to their apocalypse. No light. Right. This is just some nuclear war happened or something, and some bad guys are now trying to get hold of the nuclear football and the nuclear launch codes. So bad guys are doing bad things. Good guys are trying to do good things. But other than that, they're just doing things.
You just described every Tom Clancy story ever done, basically.
Yeah. There was an ambush bug villain in Go-Go checks whose head was covered in black and white. I really have to reread Ambush Bug. That's another one.
Really funny.
Yeah. Generic dystopia. Yes, it is. I think 3 or 4 of my books this week were post-apocalyptic books. Mm-hmm. Yeah, or post-apocalyptic are getting higher. Yeah, you got to come up with it. Here, let me show you my other post-apocalyptic book.
Really, post-apocalypse, there's only so much you can do.
Nocterra is the other post-apocalyptic book. Well, of the 4 post-apocalyptic, but this one is the one with the biggest hook, because sunlight is gone. The sun is still there, but instead of giving us sunlight, it's giving dark, and the darkness turns people and animals into monsters. And they're trying to figure out what to do, but like there's a hook. There's no light. What do we do? How do we go on? And there's twists and turns and plots going. And once again, this is Scott Snyder and Tony S. Daniels, 2 mainstream guys. Like this was Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, 2 mainstream guys giving us an indie comic. Same thing with this one, Scott Snyder and Tony S. Daniels, 2 mainstream guys giving us an indie comic. And it's solid. Just like both of these are. This one doesn't have the nice cardstock cover, so it doesn't feel as good. But and this one's got like a little more of a hook with that darkness thing, but still sort of typical post-apocalyptic. But those guys are both all those guys are mainstream professionals, so they're going to give you a good professional book no matter what. An Ambush Bug reading group. We're going to have to start that.
We'll have to make a stuffed Cheeks puppet to go with it.
I just remember cracking up reading Ambush Bug way back when. I think I was in high school probably. I was probably 16, 17. What year did Ambush Bug come out?
Oh, gosh.
It was like 84? Was it later than 84?
Somewhere in the mid-80s, I think.
When Keith Giffen did, it was just one page in his Ambush Bug story. What was that?
All his appearances are kind of spread out because he appeared in Superman stories before he had his first series.
He appeared in DC Comics Presents first, but then he had his own miniseries, 2 miniseries.
Well, he had a couple appearances in like Action Comics or one of the Superman.
Was it Action?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a few, and he was.
I have a box somewhere.
There was one issue of his miniseries on one page where he was telling the story of Ace the Bat Hound.
Yeah.
And he had like Ambush Bug cracking up as he told the story of Ace the Bat Hound, right, which had me cracking up too, because Ace the Bat Hound was a dog that Batman and Robin found. and they made, for an issue at least, into their sidekick. And so nobody would recognize the dog. They put a domino mask, the Robin domino mask on the dog. But then halfway through their battle or something, the mask fell off, and they were all worried that someone would recognize the dog now that his mask was on. And this was 6 panels of Ambush Bug telling this story, and it just cracked me up. It was just killing me. As Ambush Bug's laughing, going, and then the mask fell off. Yeah. Star Trek is like the I always say when I say to someone, if your vision of the future isn't Star Trek, you've got no vision of the future.
Well,
realistic. When you think about if someone were to say to you, how do you want the world to be in 200 years? If your answer isn't Star Trek, you're not thinking about it. Because if your answer is, well, I want people to wake up in the morning and go to a job they hate and barely get by, and then come home at night and watch TV. If that's your vision of 200 years from now, you're not even thinking. Your vision better be Star Trek, something like Star Trek.
Although that might be a little unrealistic. I have a little bit more of a pessimistic view of
what vision of the future would be realistic? It can't be the 200 years from now is not going to be like it is today. We know that, but nobody ever thinks about it. Is what it is too.
Also, think about this: how many years was it from the first powered flight that the Wright brothers did till we went to the moon?
Right.
Exactly. 70 years, 60 years.
All right. So multiply that by the rate at which technology is progressing now. 200 years from now is going to look radically different than anything we have now.
Which brings me.
Yeah, we have 35 years between.
Finished reading this book, Paying the Land by Joe Sacco, which is Joe Sacco is a reporter cartoonist. So what he does is he goes to places and interviews people and makes graphic novels about them, their lives, what's going on.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. Optimistic visions of the future are completely out of fashion right now. Oh, that is true. And they're so out of fashion there aren't any of them. But anyway, this was about the people of northwestern Canada. They're called the Dene, D-E-N-A, the First Nations people who have been living there since they came there thousands of years ago. And holy cow, this was actually a tough book to read because I didn't realize how much. I mean, you think American Indians got messed up by colonization? These guys may have been messed up even more.
Yeah.
Because of the schools. Well, first of all, when you were talking about, think of how little time there's been between the Wright brothers flight and going to the moon. Fantastic book, exactly. Comic Crack just finished reading it too. In the early part of the 20th century, the Dene were living almost a Stone Age existence in terms of the tools that they lived off the land. Their major mode of transportation was dog sled. Their whole society, their whole community was an existence that goes back to the Stone Age.
So it's pre-industrial.
Completely pre-industrial. Not even. It's like they didn't even smelt metals. They didn't do any of that stuff. All their stuff was off the land. Then of course they got metal tools from the Europeans, and of course, but they weren't making them themselves. They just improved the tools they had.
Gotcha.
The metal tools, of course, but they weren't making them. But then cut to the 20th century, and all of a sudden now, and once again, think about how much society has changed, and now that all of a sudden the rest of Canada and the rest of the world wants the minerals and the wood and everything else that's on Dene land, and the Dene people have no concept of this. Of course, they're living a Stone Age existence. They have no concept that someone from 1,000 miles away can come in, have you sign a piece of paper, and you now lost all rights to the minerals that's under that you don't even know are under the ground because you're not mining. And so there's that aspect of it. And this all happened in the 20s. Such an important book, especially considering what's currently happening up here with the child graves that are found. Yeah, he lays out the history and the story it is. And what it is, too, is the part I didn't know that messed them up so much. And I'd heard of this, but I never heard of it from the mouths of the Dene, is the schools that were set up in Canada in the 30s, 40s, 50s. With the basic concept that the authorities in Canada had was to assimilate all the Dene and all the other tribes that were around there, and send them to these government schools so that they wouldn't speak their own language, so that they'd learn Western way. But it was completely traumatizing because they got beaten by the teacher. There's all this terrible stuff that happened, and it was just it just wrecked them for 40, because everybody who went to these schools came back disassociated from the land, and there was just tons of, because they were so abused, they passed on that abuse to their family, as happens in this stuff. The last school was closed in the mid-90s. That's how long they went on. Plus, you never really... Exactly. It was a completely different... And they had no... Even like the Dene today, who are like trying to... And then there's this whole thing, like the Dene today are trying to figure out... because they still want the oil, shale oil from up there. So even within... And as they say, it's always... The oil companies that come in are outsiders, and the environmentalists who fight the oil companies are outsiders. So they have these two outside groups fighting over them. And some of them want to exploit the minerals so they can get the money and get educated and empower themselves, and some don't. So there's no consensus of what they should do. This book has a lot of them trying to find, him interviewing people who are trying to find consensus. Right. Yeah, not assimilate, eradicate their culture. Yeah, they completely wanted to eradicate any trace of their culture. That's a pretty good idea. But it was just amazing. What was that?
What's the story with the child graves that they're finding up there?
Oh, because children would just die in these schools and they just bury them. They just said they didn't mention child graves in here, but here they'd mention every now and then that so and so died. The so and so's brother went off to the school and died from whatever the flu, whatever he happened to die from, and they just thought so little of them that they just buried them in a mass grave somewhere.
Whoa.
So and you think of, they're finding 300 children in these graves. These schools were open for 50 years. So, a lot of, when you're not taking care of the kids,
right?
Quite a few of them are going to die a year. Technology doesn't make you civilized; it just makes you a more effective savage," says Quacking Duck.
Perfect. Actually,
That's Sleepy Reader's daughter, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know. Who must be? How old is she now? She's like 10. She was real little when she used to come on. After CK talked about the book, I've been watching on YouTube. Students are, oh yeah, the survivor stories are just nuts. Industrial can always wipe out the locals. Australia, yeah.
Jared, can you scroll back up to Saul's comment before that? It's the timestamps at 6:46.
6:46.
See, that's why you need to listen to Black Sabbath. If you have no metal, you have no culture.
Yeah, and it was a tough book to read. It took me a while to get through it because there's a lot in it, and there's a lot of stuff, and there's just a lot of angles and a lot of points of view to absorb. On a movie about the residential school system, hearing stories directly from the mouths of the elders who were on set was the stuff they did to these kids was. And if you didn't send your kids to these schools, they'd arrest you. It was nuts.
Fuck's sake.
And if they couldn't find you, they'd arrest other members of their family. Yeah, kids were abused too. I mean, not as they say in here. Some of the teachers were nice, but there were plenty who weren't, and there wasn't any oversight.
See, this is why I have a pessimistic view of the future. Because people do this shit if they can.
Well, people
World Comics wants to know
for thousands and thousands of years and just get better and better at finding out about it.
Wow, Quacking Duck is 13. She wrote that on my phone last week. What was the name of the movie you worked on, Comic Crack? Yeah, but really, really good stuff. Like I said, not easy to get through only because it's so emotional what happened to the Dene. It's just like, whoa. And like I said, their current situation is so complex because the kind of younger generation who didn't grow up in these schools is now coming of age, and they want to fight in a different way for their rights than their elders did. And there's this generation gap in the land, sort of like the very oldest people still are attached to the land. Then the residential school generation that went on for 40, 50 years isn't attached to the land as much anymore. And then there's these younger kids who want to get attached to the land again. And, there's no one point of view in this book. There's so many points of view.
To tie into what we were talking about visions of the future earlier, it'd be interesting to me once we start mining asteroids on a regular basis, how that is going to change how we look at land values here on Earth.
Yeah.
Because whatever company is the first to successfully mine asteroids for certain critical minerals is overnight going to be the richest company on Earth. They'll make Apple look like nothing in comparison.
Yep.
Yeah, I've read about that, and they say that there's the possibility that a random asteroid has more gold on it than all of Earth.
No.
Because
Earth really doesn't have that much gold in comparison to what you think it would have.
Because the way asteroids are formed, like materials get attracted to each other. So if you find an asteroid that's made out of lithium, then you've got, almost endless amounts of lithium or whatever it is that they make those lithium. They make lithium batteries out of lithium, right? That's what they're mining over there in Afghanistan.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Afghanistan, that's one of the biggest reasons we're over there is for the minerals.
Yeah.
It would just be interesting that once this starts happening and we get, regular mining, how that's going to change how we look at everything here on Earth land-wise.
Yeah. That they promote a better way of life. Even the Romans did that in the beginning. They didn't conquer as much as offer a better system.
Well, they didn't offer a better system. They forced a better system.
Well, to tie this back to comics, one of my favorite comics is the Dark Horse volume of Conan, number 0. Who was writing it then? All of a sudden, his name flew out of my head. I think it was the
Dark Horse. It was Kurt Busiek.
Kurt Busiek, I think, was writing it.
Yeah.
And they handled this in a really interesting way. That this whole idea is that they didn't conquer as much as offer a better system, where you got Romani. You wanted, and that's part of this too, in terms of, like I said, these people were living a Stone Age existence. So they liked getting houses. It's, it gets negative 40 degrees out. So having a house with central heating is a great thing. So it's like, sure, they don't want to be disconnected from the land, but at the same time, you don't want to be living out in negative 40 degree weather when you can have a house. So that's part of the whole book too. It's so complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the Conan book. What was interesting? Who were the in the Conan world? There's an equivalent of the Romans.
The Aquilonians.
It's the Aquilonians.
No, the Aquilonians are the Franks.
Kind of French analog.
Yeah, the Aquilonians are the Franks. I think Rome was Numidia.
The Hyperboreans?
No, the
The
Hyperboreans
were a whole.
That was the whole age, right? Yeah.
Whichever Numidia was Rome.
Whichever was the Roman equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
Had been invading the north, where Samaria is.
Right.
And
they were being invaded by the Vanir. The Vanir were the Asgardians' enemies. So those were Vikings. I think Numidia was Rome and Ophir was Greece.
I think Numidia was they were African, weren't they?
I was thinking Numidia.
No.
I'm going to get the book and look. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if it's here.
Africans were Koth? No.
Well, there was more than one.
Yeah, the one they were south of Stygia.
This dam was kind of like China.
This is the book, by the way, Conan, Born on the Battlefield, Kurt Busiek and Greg Ruth.
Yeah, Numidia was the analog to the Byzantine and the Roman Empire.
Right.
Let me see if you can. Here's a map. Where's Samaria?
Samaria is
Aquilonia. The Aquilonians, were they the?
The Aquilonians
Aquilonian is the closest Roman analog.
I think
they
were
the Franks. They were post. The Sumerians were Celts, and that's why they lived in where the British Islands were. Aquilonia is a civilized militaristic kingdom that sat around France, so they're equivalent to the Franks. They have the most advanced society. Numidia are the Romans. Ophir are the Greeks.
So whoever was the most advanced society, the equivalent of doing what Rome did here, they started moving north towards Samaria. Right. And they made their first town near the Samarian border. Okay? And it was just what Saul here said. They didn't conquer as much as offer a better system. So all of a sudden, Samaria had this Roman town on their border, and they knew this was a bad idea. But they kind of liked the trade with it. Conan even had a girlfriend in the town. But eventually the climax of the book, sort of the highlight of it, was the Sumerians, and Conan specifically, realizing that they can't leave this town here. They can't just defeat this town and have it as theirs. They have to raise it to the ground. And they actually didn't, because they were offering they knew they were offering a way of life that would attract people. And that attraction would make the Sumerians lose their civilization and their power.
This is exactly.
So, at the climax of this book, Conan and the Cimmerians kill and completely level this town. They make it no more, including Conan's girlfriend, which he's really sad about. But it's like they didn't even want to. But they're like, if we don't get rid of this town, eventually it's the end of us. So I found that this is the only fiction I've seen kind of deal with that idea. That idea, if Rome builds a town near you, their attractive way of life is what is going to attract a lot of people.
Yeah, one of Howard's main themes, and he always came back to it time and time again, is this dichotomy between being, civilized and being a savage, so to speak. Yeah, and he was always anti-civilization. So,
but I like I said, this is. Don't you remember Monty Python? What have the Romans done for us? Like I said, this is the one. I used to have like 13 volumes of this, which I sold eventually. This is the one volume I kept because I know I'm going to read that one again.
Yeah.
The Hyrcanians were Ottoman Turks, or at least they were a mix of the Ottoman Turks, the Huns, and the Mongols.
The Cimmerians are kind of like early Germanic tribes.
They have Gunderland. Bringing it back to Asterix, I touched a bit on it in the talk with Graphic Man, because there's the big fight. Vital Statistics, the leader of the Gaulish village where Asterix lives, is having to fight a Romanized Gaul. Although earlier when I don't write stuff, a few years ago I wrote for a Portuguese language blog, and I actually wrote a piece on Asterix. Asterix is already Romanized, and I think that's why he goes on adventures everywhere. Vital Statistics wants him to go on adventures everywhere, so he knows what civilization is like, so that the village knows how to survive in a Roman environment. A lot of things in Asterix are already Romanized. They already use Roman currency. And they are able to understand most other people when they travel. So I'm pretty sure they're already speaking vulgar Latin. So when you see the Romans speaking Latin, they're speaking traditional Latin, and that's why they don't understand it, because vulgar Latin was somewhat different. Vulgar Latin took advantage of the fact that the Celtic languages had articles and adverbs, which the Roman didn't, which the traditional Latin didn't. It was just a simplified language.
That was one of the things I found very weird about the first Asterix story I read, is occasionally they'd have some of the soldier or whatever exclaim things in Latin, and then they'd give you like the little translation down the bottom. I'm like,
yeah. One of the things I was also curious about too is when the paper cuts versions, when they do the newer translations, is if they're going to leave the names of some of the characters the same, because there's a druid in Asterix whose name is Getafix.
Yeah.
And especially creating a potion that makes Asterix super strong. I'm curious. Getafix has a certain connotation to it.
Yeah, but the original name is Panoramix, right. Because the things that it does, it gives your mind a panorama.
Right.
So it's kind of the same.
I love some of the puns, and some of the puns in the names are great.
See, I found the puns in the names annoying because you have to read them so many times. Christmas Bonus was the name of one of the Roman leaders there. I forget which one. I'm like, how many times do I have to read that Christmas Bonus joke?
Always.
That's what I figured. Simple villagers outsmart bureaucratic Romans every time in Asterix.
Yeah, but that's more of a consequence of them living in the countryside than in the city, because people who live in small villages don't have time for bureaucratic bullshit.
I would just like to point out that that whole Roman style of thing of offering a better choice is exactly what is going on in America right now with things like, I mean, it just brought to mind things like Walmart, because everybody hates the idea of Walmart taking away, taking all the business away from small businesses and destroying all
But everybody goes there because they're so cheap and have
everybody
tons of
goes there,
stuff.
and it's a one-stop shopping and all of that. So it's like, I mean, they're very much doing the Roman style of, we don't have to actively really, we don't have to.
So you're saying we have to raise Walmarts to the ground?
Oh God, I would go riding in on a buffalo. And
get your broadsword and your torch.
Joe Nixon had a song called "Burn Down All the Malls." So.
I know. Yep. That's I would do right there.
Oh, by the way, that just reminded me too. We were speaking before about Jim Salicrup and how he revealed that it was really David Anthony Kraft who came up with the Thanos copter. He was ghostwriting for him. Jim Salicrup is one of the editors and I think owners of Paper Cuts.
Oh, okay.
So that ties it back into Asterix and everything else Paper Cuts is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we use Amazon because it's so convenient. Yeah.
I have this mental block about any company that replaces the letter S in the name with the letter Z just to look cooler. It just annoys me.
Yeah. Everybody says that about Walmarts, but most people like to go there and buy stuff.
I am proud to say I've never spent so much as a dime in Walmart. I've only ever been in one like with other people because I'm so offended by them. I'm like such an anti-Walmart warrior, and I've been trying not to order from Amazon either and just going to, I've been finding things on Amazon and then searching them out on other websites.
I would be interested in Tim's response to this, but a few years ago, Tim talked me into going with him on a Black Friday to Walmart to shop for DVDs.
I think he's mentioned that before, the one time he went to Walmart.
Nothing against Tim, but never again.
I don't think he went again either, if I remember.
It was like being packed in, a sardine can. It was. I just wanted to get the hell out of there.
And people lose their damn minds, and then they start fighting. And there's. I would say that's one of the few things that I'm not proud of this, but that's one of the few things I enjoy about Black Friday is watching the videos of people losing their damn minds, and over a TV, and or the last slow cooker on the rack. I'm just like, dude, just live without it.
The problem is, as Sal says here, we simply need to learn to live with less. The problem is there's nothing simple about that. We have evolved to deal with constant scarcity. It's built into us to want more.
Not to mention planned obsolescence. Like you can't get a printer repaired nowadays.
Well, that's a business strategy. I'm talking about basic human biology.
Oh, okay.
We want more. It's the same reason that everybody's overweight.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because we're built to eat as much as we can. We're built so that scarcity. We're built to survive scarcity, and when we don't have scarcity, we just hoard.
If you go to a buffet
and
lunch,
not to mention that the available food, especially in America, it's very difficult to you have to put forth an effort to find food that isn't loaded with sugar and salt.
Right.
That's the consequence of industrialization of the food industry. The point that Jared was making, if you have a buffet lunch, you are going to try to eat as much as you can just because it's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we still think as with caveman brain, because as if we don't know when we're going to eat again. Even if intellectually we know that we can have 3 meals a day, the caveman brain still goes, eat as much as you can just because it's there.
Yeah.
And you're not, and you can't defeat it.
Yeah, but we have an Aldi's opened near me a few years ago, but all the people picketing it when it opened kind of put me off Aldi's.
I've never.
They're anti-union, so unions picket them where they open. And it's not just when it's a source only from China. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
People get mad when I bring up that Rick and Morty's creators are extremely anti-union. They don't like it when I mention that.
Yeah.
You mention what?
The creators of Rick and Morty have both made comments about being very anti-union. And a matter of fact, some of the animators were being forced to work overtime, and they weren't being paid overtime rates.
Ooh.
And when they formed a union to stand up for themselves, the creators went nuts. That's one of the reasons I will not watch that show.
I did not know that, and I may have to follow your example.
But everybody gives them a pass because it's Rick and Morty.
No, but I mean, I'm really hardcore when it comes to. You have no. I boycotted so many things, and I bend over backwards trying to find stuff that isn't made in China. But sometimes it just can't be avoided. Like when I was looking for a coffee maker, it took me forever to find a coffee maker that was made. I forget even where it's made, but it was like
I was just looking at started looking for cordless drills, and the first thing I did was put in cordless drills made in America, just to see if any were, and they were. DeWalt, I think, is made in America.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's why I haven't shopped at Aldi's. Because they're anti-union. I'm a union fan.
I'm in a union, so I can't really be anti-union.
The only unions
I'm not in a union, but I'm a union fan.
The only unions that work in Portugal are the unions for public servants. People who work for businesses, they can't afford to pay union dues. So, and the unions don't actually want to work. The unions that take in public servants, those work because they still get paid even if they're not working.
Well, the difference too is first of all, I don't believe they can't pay union dues because as we've seen in this pandemic, our billionaires have gotten richer and richer and richer.
But the workers can't pay union dues.
The workers can't. Yeah, well, that's because I've heard the businesses can't pay union wages. And it's like, yes, they can.
Of course they can.
Of course they can.
Yes, they can.
But also,
if a book company can pay union wages.
Like a lot of the best jobs left in our economy in the U.S. are state jobs, because state jobs don't exist to create a profit. And jobs that exist only to create a profit for the owners, they're of course not going to pay you much. That's their whole job. Their whole job is to not.
They don't have to. If they
they scheme and they spend all their time and money in Congress figuring out ways to not pay you. That's why I like unions, because unions try to figure out ways to pay you.
Yeah, if it weren't, I mean, the union at HarperCollins that we're all automatically in by being employees. It's because of that union that we only work 35-hour weeks, and they have to pay us a base, like our base salary is higher than any other publishing company because of that.
Yeah, several years ago there was talk about creating some sort of a union or some sort of a group to represent all comics creators, where they would have access to things like health insurance, and benefits and what have you. But it never has, and probably never will materialize.
Well, in the 50s, I think it was Esposito and Rossandro who went and told to DC on everyone and got everyone. That was probably the 60s, and many unions are corrupt, but that doesn't matter. I mean, the whole the businesses to begin with, whose whole business is to make monies for the stockholder, is corrupt to begin with. I mean, you actually have to corrupt a union. You don't have to corrupt.
There was this guy in the 1930s in auto racing. The guy was the president of the IBEW, and he was the owner of a car that won the Indianapolis 500, which he bought with not only with the union money, but also with the numbers game that he was running for the Chicago Mafia.
Yeah, Sal just ruined my looking for tools that were made in America. Nothing is more. I worked in comics for 15 years. You don't get more corrupt than that. Yeah. Big money, yeah. Union wages equal living wages, exactly. Asian employees at local Chinese buffets, they stay thin, but the clientele isn't.
The staff is.
Well, I mean, they probably have a different diet than the typical American does.
Late payment. Try being, yeah. If unions remained united and worldwide, then there's companies that would pick up sticks and move to non-union states. They're all corrupt. I don't know what "they're all corrupt" means, but I don't believe that.
One good union that we have in a private business here is from the Volkswagen factory, and the union was good until the political parties got involved, and all of a sudden the union wasn't working anymore.
Yep, well, it's tough. Power wrecks people.
Yeah, they were talking about companies moving. I can't remember. Maybe it was Google. There was one company that moved to Ireland just specifically so they wouldn't have to pay taxes.
Oh, that's why. What is it? Biden's come with he's getting people to agree to that universal tax throughout countries, so that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But here's what's going to happen if we don't get this all figured out: another post-apocalyptic comic where the United States and all the other countries, I don't know. The apocalypse happens.
Is there a post-apocalyptic comic that's also written by Matt Kent?
What was that?
Is there also a post-apocalyptic comic that is written by Matt Kent? Because
I don't think so. I think he does.
He's writing half the comics title.
He does paranoid conspiracy stuff. I don't think he's ever done a post-apocalyptic thing.
I kind of like the word post-elliptic.
The Pocky Lips. Where is that from? Pocky Lips. Is that from Mad Max? Not Mad Max. The one after it.
The third one.
The third one.
Yeah,
that's where Pocky Lips is from.
Yeah.
But this is issue 6 of 7 of Steve Scroce's Post-Americana, which is another post-apocalyptic. But this one at least is a post-apocalyptic story with style and violence.
Oh, violence.
So I appreciate that. Extra violence. And there's one of those cities survived in the mountains in Denver, one of those bases, and they're now coming out. Kent is pre-apocalyptic. There we go.
Okay.
Definitely. He's got the paranoid conspiracy stuff down. But I've been enjoying this one. I don't think I've enjoyed it as much as his last one, Maestros, which was a magic fantasy one. But it's been fun. Violence and gunfire and good artwork and nice coloring and stuff like that. And the dogs are going crazy.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's the beagles. They're shrill. If they get too loud, I'll mute myself. It was very funny on your video that where you were just one after another. You're like, and this is another post-apocalyptic, and this is a post.
I didn't realize I had 4 post-apocalyptic books this week. How crazy is that? I don't know Kent's Grass Kings. Is that one he drew himself or someone else drew? Because I like the stuff he draws himself best. American Flag. I like that version of the post-apocalypse. That's because you could still be. Well, I guess you couldn't be because I was going to say that's because you could still be a porn star in American Flag, but he just stopped being one because he was replaced by a hologram. Tyler Jenkins did. Yeah, I don't know that one. But like I said, I prefer Matt Kent's drawing. Like Mind Management was a favorite of mine. I really like that. That may have been the first time I read Matt Kent stuff. I can't remember. But I also liked Department H. And I've liked about half the stuff he's written but not drawn.
remember one of the first comics I read as a kid was actually post-apocalyptic. It was a series that John Byrne did that was called Doomsday Plus One.
That's right. I'm trying to think that may have been my. I'm trying to think of Planet of the Apes. That was early post-apocalyptic stuff for me.
I think that was the first one that I ever saw.
That was a
probably the
movie
first one a lot of people were exposed to.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I was exposed to the Doomsday Plus One. May have been one of the first post-apocalyptic. What were the post-apocalyptic comics of the 70s?
Killraven?
Were there?
No.
Commanding.
Commanding, yeah.
Doomsday
That's
Plus
right.
One.
I think Kint's storytelling when he's drawing.
That's a good question.
It's strong because the writing, the drawing is the writing. I mean, they're the same thing in comics at a certain point. So depending on which artist draws your plot or script, it really matters. And I think he's good at drawing his own. Yeah, Commandy is one. Doomsday Plus One. Did Marvel have any post-apocalyptic comics? Killraven. There's another.
Yeah.
Deathlock.
I think in the 70s. It's
Deathlock, kind of.
OMAC?
Yeah, Deathlock. Yeah, definitely. Post-apocalyptic stories took off. Definitely.
Some of the things I'm thinking about are not mainstream Marvel stuff, like Cobalt 60 that was done by Vaughn Bodie was post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
That was post-apocalyptic. I only saw a little of that here and there. So
Tank Girl.
that wasn't the 70s, though.
Yeah,
That was
No, it was not in the 70s. That's true.
I don't think there was a ton of post-apocalyptic stuff in the 70s. Not like there is
Not
now.
really. And
Yeah.
I'd like toast-apocalyptic things.
that's when
What
you
was
burn that's when you burn the toast. I actually like my toast on the burnt so.
Yeah.
No, Devil Dinosaur is prehistoric. It's not really post-apocalyptic.
Logan's Run. Would that be post-apocalyptic?
I don't think so. It's just very dystopian.
Yeah. They have order. Everything is ordered, and that's exactly the problem. So yeah, the society functions, but it's an oppressive society.
But
didn't
after-
didn't that society evolve because of an apocalyptic event that forced them all?
I think it did, and after at the end of the movie, the society kind of ended, and I think like the TV show and the comic book all took place after. I don't know.
It's kind of like Buck
Yeah.
Rogers. Technically, it's
Yeah.
post-apocalyptic, but functionally, it's not.
Yeah, in the book they were on because the novel's different from the movie. The movie implies that there was a nuclear exchange and they're living in the Dome City. In the novel, they live anywhere in the world. They just kill you when you become an adult. And they were on the edge of a societal breakdown because of overpopulation. That's why they all killed themselves at 21.
Gotcha.
Oh, the Omega Man. Yeah, that was a post-apocalyptic movie. But did the Omega Man ever have a comic?
Nope.
I don't think so.
Well, Omega Man was based on. Oh gosh, I can see his face plain as day, but I can think Richard Matheson's story.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, boy.
Yeah, Boy and His Dog was.
Yeah, but those were movies. I was talking comics that were post-apocalyptic. Of course, there may have been more movies that were post-apocalyptic than comics.
Probably, yeah.
There were a lot of really trashy paperback books.
Because movies were done in one. And comics were
Alley, but I don't think that was in the 70s. It was in the 80s. When the movie
Did they do a Boy and His Dog comic?
Richard Corbin did the adaptation of that.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Nice.
That's a dark story. It's a good story, but it's dark.
Was Shade the Changeling in the 70s? I think Shade took place in a different reality. So I don't think that may have been more of a repressive society one, right?
Was OMAC post-apocalyptic?
No, they had a very consumerist society.
Okay.
That just took place in the future, I think.
I've never. Yeah.
The indigenous.
Yeah, it's Kamandi is an alternate future of Omak because Buddy Blank is Kamandi's grandfather.
Actually, he mentioned everything after Columbus from the. I find it interesting because only recently I ever heard, and I found this thought interesting, that the reason we Americans find post-apocalyptic fiction so fascinating is because our ancestors moved into a post-apocalyptic world. Because the apocalypse happened to the indigenous people here in North and South America. And then we moved in afterwards. So that was our initial landscape of this country, was post-apocalyptic. It even went so far as the East Coast was settled right in old Indian villages, which had been wiped out by disease. I found that an interesting thought. What was that?
I said Atomic Nights was definitely post-apocalyptic.
Oh, yeah.
Technically, Xenozoic Tales is too. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking there's tons of post-apocalyptic stuff later on. Who's John Prophet? I don't know. Yeah, I was just thinking of 70s post-apocalyptic stuff. Yeah. That I found that interesting too. That's not even my thought. I read that somewhere and was like, I never thought of that before. That might be one of the reasons why there's a fascination with the apocalypse here in the USA, is we moved into that. There's even, I think at the time they called like the plague that happened on the East Coast in, like, I don't know, I think it was the 1600s. The Pilgrims and whoever called it God clearing the land for them. That's how they viewed it.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, that's. So I imagine, the people who were very aware that the apocalypse happened and they were moving in after somebody else's apocalypse happened, I should say.
Right.
There's a funny thing that just came to mind. When you wipe out these civilizations, the people that survive, they are the ones that are closest to living in the nature, which are the ones that don't have access to a culture. Which, like when I watch. Whoops! Something froze. Okay. When Joe Rogan has the Graham Hancock in his show, and Graham Hancock is the guy who thinks there were several civilizations before the Mesopotamians started having large cities. But one thing is possible. I mean, if you wipe out an organized society, the people that are left are the ones that live outside the large cities where they don't have access to culture, and that's why they don't remember things as they were. They just have their land, and whatever happens in the big cities is far away.
Well, and of course today's version of that would be, how do I put this? Like we all use cell phones, we all use computers, we all use like all this crap, but how many of us know how to make one? So,
right.
If an apocalyptic event were to happen, and I mean, even something as simple as hooking up solar panels to your house, you'd have to do some serious research into how to.
Knowing how to make one is the easy part of it. You can find that information. It's in books.
True, but having the ability to
it's the industrial capacity to make it that you don't have.
Exactly.
I would guess that a lot of people wouldn't know how to find that information in books.
That's another
that's why we have libraries. Yeah.
I know that. But how many people have never been to a library?
It makes me sad that people don't.
And how many people there are engineering books about it, but how many people would be able to read an engineering book and figure out how to build something out of it?
Right,
Yeah.
without having a YouTube video to guide them through it.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I live near an extremely large library, Virginia Tech. It's huge. I could go there right now and
A
get
Unabomber reference.
right, and get plans to build an atomic bomb.
Mhm.
That information is available to the public.
But then the people,
I don't have the
I feel
resources to do it, but I have
Right,
access to the knowledge on how to do it.
yeah.
right.
But
You just-
then it gets complicated. I mean, I failed shop in high school.
You should only use tech that you can teach your children. Well, you can teach your children how to use a phone. But our last post-apocalyptic book of the week, number
Here's
4,
another one.
has taken a turn for the science fiction. And this is kind of the least post-apocalyptic book. This is kind of like Logan's Run.
Don't give me any spoilers. I just picked it up today.
I won't. No spoilers, except to say this started out as, how would I say, some sort of apocalypse happened where now people have to live in these domed cities. Like the air outside is bad for them.
And all the
And so
wildlife is like big and mutant and scary.
Yeah. And the outside air will give you a disease and you'll die. And for some reason, there's the people who run the city in rebels. I don't even know why the rebels are rebelling. They didn't really go into it that much. But it's also a personal story about this guy trying to find his ex-girlfriend. So we've got the city over here with some rebels and some regular people. And way down here under the ocean, we've got this scientific base where some scientists are, and this is where the ex-girlfriend is, down on the scientific base. Something happens down on this base that
It's like a portal.
puts her in danger. So the guy from the city and a few rebels decide to go down to the base and see what's going on. Meanwhile, the leader of the city sends soldiers after them. And then we find out down in this underwater base, there's some interface with an alternate reality. Where there are these aliens, and they crossed over into this alien world, and now there's all science fiction-y things happening. So it's kind of, it's not like it's more apocalypse like Logan's Run than like, A Boy and His Dog. In the Martian Chronicles, after humanity colonizes Mars and all the Martian families look like his own reflections in a pool of water, and they realize they are now... I remember really liking the Martian Chronicles when I read it in high school. Then I read it about 15 years later, and I didn't find it as interesting. I don't remember. I don't know why.
There's a lot of poetry, not technical, not literal, but there's a lot of poetic analogs in the Martian Chronicles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if the apocalypse happens, we'll be screwed no matter what libraries we have around us. It'll be tough. Outside will kill you like Los Angeles. Yeah. I can't be like Logan's Run unless Jenny Gutter is in it.
His mind is in the gutter.
Good old Jenny Gutter.
And her...
Or Agutter. I don't know how to say that.
Clothing she had in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I have to point out this subject that'll get this is what got everyone going in the who was it in the comments of Sleepy Leader and Comic Cracks show this week. After 20 years and 6 months, I finally read Jimmy Corrigan, the smartest boy on earth. I've had this sitting around for 20 years. Every time I went to read it, I just was like, I can't take this. I just find his writing, and finally I decided to read it like a comic strip. Where I'd read 2 or 3 pages a day. Because I love the art. The artwork in this is just beautiful. If you've never seen Chris Ware's artwork, it is gorgeous. He does he's very graphic designy with these
his graphic
panels and the drawings are beautiful, and the color is beautiful, and the line work is beautiful, and holy cow, do I like his drawing. But I can't read it. The story is, like Paolo says, he can't read this because it's depressing. I don't even find it that depressing.
It's not even it's depressing. I mean, it's boring. I don't want to commiserate with Jimmy and his dad. I want to leave. They can commiserate among themselves, and I'm going to do something else.
It's about
like Seinfeld, in that you wouldn't want to spend 30 minutes in a room with any of those characters.
But they were making you laugh on Seinfeld.
Yeah, but if you put up with them in real life, they probably would.
No, but that's okay. They're trying to entertain. It's like some people say the same thing about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is one of my favorite shows. Sure, you wouldn't want to hang out with any of those maniacs, but they're entertaining you on a show. That's what they're supposed to do. These guys aren't even in. This is a story about 3 generations of sons who are just introverted and miserable and have nothing to offer the world. And it's their lives. And you're like, kid. And it goes into minute detail of everything that happens.
So you had to read it old man style?
What was that?
You had to read it old man style?
Oh, yeah. Serious old man style. Chris Ware is
Paul's content or his comment about the utopian science fiction stories. Most science fiction up through the 60s was usually utopian. It was utopian to some degree.
The whole idea of actual science fiction is to take a look at current technology, project it into the future, and see how that's going to affect the way we live. And almost always
their interpolations of future technology as well as how that's going to impact human experience.
Science fiction, it's all about how science is going to affect the way we live in the future. And you have to try and figure that out. And then there's what we now call science fiction, which is just lightsabers and blasters.
That's
space opera,
which is
not
completely
really space
different.
Yeah, technically it's not even space opera, but it's
fantasy.
But all science fiction used to be at its heart optimistic, because at its heart it thought technology would make things better.
Yeah, but
that's not true anymore.
Science fiction really took off in the 70s.
When?
In the 70s.
Yeah. I think it did, and now almost all science fiction is dystopian. We do not have the same optimism about technology that they used to have.
And that's sad.
Paolo just disappeared.
I mean, it's
also sad that we have people that think we never went to the moon either. So.
Oh my God, that makes me so crazy.
Did anyone else not see Paolo get up and all of a sudden he was just gone?
He's back.
Like some frames dropped out and all of a sudden he teleported away.
He did the Batman thing.
Not bad, man.
Yeah, and I think Chris Ware is a great artist. I just don't think he's a great writer.
It's
Modern Ligne Claire, I don't get that reference.
He's talking about that
is the
clean line style. That's
the line. Okay.
Yeah.
And Chris Ware a couple of weeks ago, Chris Ware received the Grand Prix of Angoulême a couple of weeks ago.
That's funny.
What?
Competes for how boring the story can be. It's true.
There are some. I agree.
But I actually like stories that examine what's usually unexamined, which can be interpreted that way by somebody. Because I like the mundane. I like when people examine the mundane to figure out what it really is. I'm okay with that. This doesn't do that.
I also understand where he's coming from, that there's a lot of comics, real life genres that are a lot of navel gazing going on. It's like,
See,
I figured that stuff out when I was 12 years old.
I don't actually mind navel gazing. I mean, of course, it can be boring if they've got no insight, but I'm okay with navel gazing. What I'm not, this isn't navel gazing. No, this is just 3 introverted generations doing nothing. That's what that's the problem I have. Movies allow science fiction to take off. They allowed science fiction to become special things. Yeah, I don't know how Paolo disappeared either.
Yeah, the internet was going down, and you guys kept breaking off. So I went and got the cord.
Oh, okay. Harvey, I have found some Harvey P. When I first read Harvey P. Carr in the 80s, I thought he was too dull for me. But the Harvey P. Carr stuff I read in the 2000s, I enjoyed. So I don't know if he changed or I did. Yeah, I do not find the writing in Jimmy Corrigan great. I don't understand that at all. I mean, I struggle with it. Zot I enjoy a lot.
Yeah, I'd much rather read Zot than read Jimmy Corrigan. Even though I like the graphic design of Chris Ware, I just think Zot's a better story.
Zot, that's one of those that I've been meaning for years to reread. I probably haven't read it since the 90s.
Yeah.
I've never read
Did you read Destroy that Scott McCloud did?
Oh, yeah. I've got that on my shelf. I read that just last year, I think, because that's just one issue, so it's easy enough to read.
Yeah.
And there's only one word in it, so it's. But Destroy is an oversized. Let me see, comic. That where's my copy of it? My copy is somewhere over here. Oh, is that it? There we go. There's Destroy. So it's an oversized comic. There's a regular trade paperback. And it's Scott McCloud doing one giant fight scene. And it's really well done. And the guy just yells Destroy the whole time. It's kind of if some Superman type guy got I think he got some virus or something from space that just made him go berserk. So now he's just yelling Destroy and getting into a fight with one of his buddies here. And they're just destroying it's an excuse to smash things in New York City. He gives actual New York City landmarks and stuff. I think there's the Chrysler building getting destroyed there. I think they gave us a Statue of Liberty a moment ago. Where was that? Oh, there's the Statue of Liberty getting destroyed. So it's just an excuse for, what does it say? Parents beware. This comic book is exactly what you think it is. 32 pages of meaningless, overblown violence, mayhem, and destruction, plus one naughty word.
What year was that published? I don't remember.
Let's see. 1986.
Okay.
Man, a lot of stuff came out in 1986, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It's the year I graduated from high school.
2 years there. It was the year I graduated from my 2-year college. But I don't know where you could probably find this on eBay and places. But this is a lot of fun. It's never been in a bag because who's got a bag?
Also kind of prescient about what a lot of Image comics came to be as well.
Comics in general. Well, it was making fun of all comics at the time, even in 1986.
Even more applicable later on.
Plenty of superhero comics that were nothing but fight scenes.
Right.
Long before Image.
Yeah, that's true.
And I must say, mind the comics, a lot of people think Chris Ware's writing is great. I've always found him baffling because he should be up my alley. Everybody who's kind of in the similar genre as Chris Ware, I like, For some reason, I don't like him, and I'm always like, why? I mean, I buy his books; they're so pretty.
Yeah,
they're so pretty.
There's just like some artist creators that just don't click with you.
I still have to do a video on this book, which is Chris Ware monograph. And this one's amazing in that this is all about Chris Ware's process.
Right.
This is him showing you his process, the sketches he did for his projects, and it's just beautiful. This is, this isn't a comic. This is him making all his comics. It's just, and you can get this for $30 now. For some reason, it went on clearance, and you can find it in comic shops and on Amazon for $30. So there's his New Yorker covers, really big. I mean, those are just beautiful.
Oh, speaking of, I remember Sleepy Reader a few weeks ago was talking about how he didn't like New Yorker. At Ollie's, I picked up a compilation of New Yorker comics. And originally, it's a 2-volume box set. It's like really heavy. You wouldn't want to drop it on your foot. It's I think the book was originally like 120 some, and Ollie's is blowing it out for $19.99.
Wow!
I haven't even taken it out of the plastic yet.
There's an Ollie's up near my sister's, about 40 minutes from here, but I almost never get over there.
But the entire reason I bought it was just to see if it have Charles Addams comics on it.
Yeah, though I haven't seen a book of Charles Addams comics in a long time.
There are, most of them are, like 99% of them are out of print, because I've looked it up. I looked it up a few months ago, because I did a deep dive. Like, I'd like to get, it would be nice to have a giant compilation of Charles Addams books, but no, there are a bunch of different ones, and there's some overlap in them. But they're all out of print, and some of them you can get really cheap, and other ones are really expensive. The same thing with Gahan Wilson, too. Some of them are cheap, some of them are really expensive, and there was one they did is comics he did for Playboy a few years ago. That was a nice 3-volume set. But there's still not really a comprehensive collection of stuff like that I would like to see.
You know what I have one book of, speaking of Playboy, that's really, it must have been the 90s they put it out. Some collections of Little Annie Fanny.
Oh, yeah.
I am not a fan of Little Annie Fanny, but in the back, they had a lot of Harvey Kurtzman's sketches.
Right.
And his layouts, and how he used to do things on different levels of tracing paper with different colors. He would he'd do a drawing layout in like red on one layer of vellum, then he'd throw another layer over it and do it in green, and it was just really interesting to see. And of course, they had Will Elder sketches and stuff. It's like I didn't even like the comics, but I liked all the work they did
put together.
Yeah, it was really amazing stuff. I have no idea if they're still in print or not either, but
it would be interesting if somebody did a history of the techniques of comic production.
Oh yeah.
They could do a whole chapter on Ray Zone and his 3D stuff.
I was just reading too about Richard Corbin, and I didn't know this. The reason his color was so different in the 70s and 80s than everyone else's color was because he did it. He didn't just do the coloring himself. He did the separations himself, in that he exposed the film. Right. Kind of. He did like the production stuff at the that the printing plant did. Yeah. Like he had his own technique for where he would overexpose stuff to get brighter colors. So that's why Richard Corbin, he always got like, how do I describe it?
Almost like a day glow effect, but not quite.
Well, not quite, but not just day glow. He would go from a really light value of the color to a really dark value of the color in a very small area.
So there was no gradation. It was like
there was a gradation, but it was small. It was
right.
That's how he got everything so voluminous.
Yeah, I noticed.
But he was the only one doing it because he could.
One of the Spirit covers he did that Warren published, I think is one of the Spirit magazines.
Right.
Was really colorful, but it didn't look garish.
Yeah. And Sleepy, he cut out layers for each color, but they physically had to do that. He had to physically do the color separations, which means usually the way comics were made in the pre-digital age, the colorist would do what's called a color guide. They'd get Marvel would take the original art, they'd shrink it down to it would fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and they'd give that sheet of paper, the photocopy sheet of paper, to the colorist. And the colorist would take their Dr. Martin's dyes, or later on sometimes markers, and draw and color it with the Dr. Martin's dyes. But that was only a color guide. Those color guides went to the color separators, who was at a completely other place. Usually they were associated with the printing plant. Or else I think Murphy Anderson ran a color separation company like all through the 70s. I think it was. He had his own.
Know that. That's interesting.
I think it was him, if I'm not mistaken. And they had their, I forget, I just read a blog on how they do it. But they actually had to take, it was like, they did, part of it was done photographically, and part of it was done where you had to get film. First, you'd photograph the black plate. So like the black and white artwork would be photographed. It's on a piece of film, like, 35 millimeter film, except this big. And it's all black and it's there. Then you have to lay a sheet of clear acetate over that. And you have to look at the color guide. And where you have 4 plates. And where there's red, you have to cut out and put down a little piece of red plastic kind of thing. So it's like the people who are doing the color separations had to actually take, a scalpel, an X-Acto knife, a razor blade, and cut out the shapes of the color and stick them down on this. And they had to do that for blue, they had to do that for red, they had to do that for yellow. And all the colors that mixed together, they had to do that for, which is why you could only use a handful. You could only use 4 reds and 4 blues and how they mix together, because that's all they were going to cut out and put down.
I think it would be interesting also to see how much of that he discovered is trial and error. They've had some happy accidents.
And Corbin was doing his own cutting out, and he was doing his own color separations. And so he could do them his own kind of unique way, because he didn't depend on the color separators interpreting his color guides.
Yeah, so it's kind of like Zipatone, except it was just color instead of...
Yeah, sort of like that, except it was blocks of... And what's interesting, too, is before the age... I don't know when color guides were invented, but I know... Like, because I always hear Marie Severin get credited for inventing color guides at EC Comics. But I have no idea if color guides were used in the rest of the industry before then. Because Marie Severin, they brought her on board because to be production at EC and to oversee the color of EC Comics. And she didn't. And what EC Comics used to do. And I don't know if this was standard practice throughout the whole industry. I've never read that, but I think it may have been. Is you just send your black and whites to the printer and they'd color them. However, they'd get stuff wrong and they wouldn't pay attention.
Oh, God.
And that's when Marie Severin when she was working for EC, started painting the color guides and sending them along with the pages.
I was wondering how many of those mishaps would have inspired a story of murdering somebody with an axe. Like, this is what I want to do. The guy's doing the coloring to my book.
The cover that was done in the 70s in heavy metal was called full color printing. Even though it was the same presses and the same process. But instead of having hand-cut separations, they'd be done photographically. So you'd take the original art, you'd put it on a big camera, and you'd photograph it. And then you'd make the color plates from that full color photograph. And that was way more expensive than what they call 4-color, which was comics. Even though you end up with the same 4 printing plates either way.
And heavy metal would have to be dependent on the source material from the French magazine.
Yeah.
Up until a certain point, then they started publishing some original content too.
But
the original comic from number 1. But at least Metal Hurlant existed until 1987. So you have about a decade of material where most of the comic would be sourced from France. But they even from number 1, they have Richard Corbin in there.
Mm-hmm.
But what it is they could archive those negatives that they make the printing plates from. That's what they do. And then when they wanted a foreign edition, they either send the negatives to the U.S. or they send I think I'm not sure if it might have been too expensive to make a copy of the negatives. They may have just sent the actual negatives to the U.S. and then they were responsible for getting them back to them after they were done printing.
Yeah.
I was probably not cheap enough to make copies of the negatives.
Yeah, until the 1980s, Marvel and DC used to only send the black plate to foreign licensors.
Right.
Because they didn't know if the licensor printed in color or in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Which is why you can see there was one. I think Tom Brevoort on his blog posts a lot of times these crazy colored versions of foreign Marvel comics. Mm-hmm. Because they didn't have any idea what the colors were, so they just put their own in. So you'd see Spider-Man in green and red, Doctor Doom in purple and orange, whatever, because they had no idea what the colors were. They were just filling it in.
Yeah. Even in the 1980s, they had a copy of the original one to see how it was done, but sometimes they would color things a little bit different because with the different size, sometimes there would be too much detail to properly print. So they do one of those things where the color the whole background in gray or purple,
right?
When the original would be fully colored. But they knew what the colors were like. So when Wolverine changed costume, they knew it stopped being blue and yellow, and it was now brown.
Mm-hmm.
Like there in the 60s, the Brazilians that were publishing Daredevil, even the first 6 issues, the comic was always painted red. Because they knew the costume was red, but they didn't know it changed to red at number 7.
Current comics are still 4 plates. That's offset printing. You can actually get print on demand stuff. If it's like you can get a print on demand comic, a lot of that is more like a computer printer. But like Marvel and DC stuff is still offset printing 4 plates, where the printing plate hits the piece of paper 4 times, 4 different plates.
When you're printing in that model with the 4-color method, is it cheaper to print certain colors than it is others?
I don't think so. I think it's all the same.
No, it's just percentage.
That blows one of my theories I've always had out of the water.
No. Brazilian Ghost Rider was green with a red skull.
Yeah, even in the 80s, the color was slightly different from the US version.
Gotcha.
And you can avoid all that color trouble just by printing in black and white.
Yes.
This is my next comic of the week, Terry Moore Serial, which is just good. I mean, Terry Moore, if you've read Terry Moore, you know it's always good. If you've never read Terry Moore, I was talking about the charmingness of the drawings. There's one on the back. This is about this little 13-year-old girl who appears to be a 13-year-old girl, but is really a 1,000-year-old demon and a 13-year-old stalking a serial killer. She's hunting down a serial killer who killed her friend. So
I was thinking about picking that one up today, but
and Terry Moore is just a master. I mean, he's just
is
a
that
master
the plot
cartoonist.
of a normal sex manga?
What was that?
Isn't that the plot of a normal sex manga?
It could be.
1,000-year-old demon pretending to be a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah, that sounds very Japanese, doesn't it? But yeah, I mean, he's been doing it he's been making stories for 30 years, and they're all good.
What number are they on of serial?
This is number 5 out of 10. He collects all his stuff in trade paperbacks pretty quickly too.
Oh, good.
And in nice omnibus versions.
Yeah, I would think, because I was looking at that today, that I had so much stuff in my pile.
Right. Right. Yeah, his stuff is just he's one of those A-level guys who whatever his next series is, I just buy. You know, it's not even a question.
Yeah, I met Terry Moore at Heroes Con years ago in Charlotte, and I was carrying around a book I'd published. It was by Roy Crinkle. And he looked and he saw it. It's like, can I? And he perked up all of a sudden. His eyes lit up and said, "Can I see that?"
No.
I showed it to him, and he looked through it. And was like, "This book is great."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I bought
it. Roy Crinkle. Ed Murr has a little Roy Crinkle original drawing. I have a scan of it somewhere. It's pretty cool.
Surprisingly enough, you can buy some original Crinkle sketches for what I would consider to be not a lot of money.
Yeah.
Talking like $300, maybe less.
Who did that drawing that Ed Reynolds just got?
Oh, I don't know.
I forget who the
I don't
artist
know. I saw that and I didn't know the artist.
Yeah, me either, but it was a pretty drawing.
Yeah.
It was very nice. It was like a lady in a spacesuit, but it was just a really cute drawing.
Yeah. Ed Murr, I think it was last year or the year before, actually got a little Frank Frazetta drawing too.
Ooh. And
he was able to get it because he thought the people selling it didn't note that it was a Frank Frazetta drawing. It was in a bundle. It was just a tiny one too. It wasn't
even so Frazetta.
And it was in a bundle with like 5 other artists' little sketches. And Ed just was like, I think that's a Frank Frazetta signature. And so he actually bought the bundle for, I don't know, a couple $100 for like 5 little drawings. I forget who the other people were, all comic names too. And he's like, I can't believe I just got a Frazetta drawing.
I mean, to even touch a Frazetta sketch these days is less than $2,000.
That's why he was shocked.
Yeah.
And unless somebody, forged a Frazetta drawing and threw it in there just so they could make $200 off of drawings that were already worth $200.
There is a lot of that going on.
I imagine, but I imagine if you were to fake a Frank Frazetta drawing, you'd want to get real money for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't fake a Frank Frazetta drawing and then put it in with a 5 drawing lot that didn't go for Frank Frazetta money.
Makes sense.
So it would be weird. It would be weird. And my last book of the week is the one Comic Crack mentioned at the very beginning of our show, the last issue of Carmen, number 5, which I think had a very satisfying ending. I was unsure of how they were going to end it, because the whole story is about Carmen is this angel of death, I guess she is, whose job it is to bring, once a person dies, to bring them to the afterlife, to whatever happens next to them, whether they go up or down or go into a worse life or a better life or this or that. And throughout it, they gave us a little hint of things. There's a bureaucracy in the afterlife too. And this whole issue was her spending time with the woman who she was bringing to the afterlife. And there was this whole thing going on in the series about how some of her co-workers and immediate bosses didn't like her spending so much time with this woman. She was just supposed to bring her to the next life and move on. But she wanted to get to know her, wanted to talk to her, and did all this stuff. I mean, wanted to spend 5 issues of a comic series with her. And so I was kind of like, at the end of this, is she just going to be alive again? That's how I figured they were going to end it. And that's kind of how they ended it, but it was much better than that. There was actually a point to it all, which I found very satisfying. Made it back just in time, Comic Crack said. Yes, I was just saying I liked the ending. I wasn't like I was afraid they were just going to make her alive again, just sort of willy-nilly. But there was fantastic miniseries. The only thing I'm disappointed of is I was just looking. The hardcover volume of this is out in February, but it's not oversized. I'd prefer an oversized version of it to see the art even better. And Julian March is such a show-off. The lead character, the dead woman, is nude nearly the entire series. But it's not sort of gratuitous at all. And it's not it's not really sort of erotic art at all. It's just kind of him showing off how good he is at drawing the figure. I mean, it's like, that's what I got from him. Like, this guy is such a show-off. Because it's not titillating. It's just, she died in the tub, so she's nude.
Right.
Yeah, not oversized. That's really exactly.
The French edition is oversized, and it's got a.
The French edition I saw wasn't over. The French, at least the description of the French edition at Amazon wasn't oversized.
But the text says it's grand format, so I think it's oversized. It also has 4 pages of sketches.
Yeah, I want an oversight. I took away from Carmen a story about free will and spiritual resurrection, where immortality is the life we breathe on others through our actions. I liked how the last 2 pages tied it to the start. Yeah, it really was about immortality, free will, and responsibility. Because it turned out that Carmen's actions, even though all of Carmen's coworkers and bosses kept telling her actions had no consequences, her actions ended up having some consequences. That was part of the journey, and they were astonished that her actions had so the people who were saying her actions had no consequences actually learned something too.
I like his quote about immortality is the life we breathe on others through our actions.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody has bad breath, are you going to have to live with that forever?
Yeah, not oversized. Losing the. Yeah, I don't want to buy a regular size.
Ricardo Delgado just posted on Instagram the other day. There's a Spanish published version.
Yeah, that's the one Gore Vidal.
That's oversized.
Yeah. That's the one Gore Vidal bought. I don't know if it's oversized, so he could finish the story before the rest of us.
Right. And I want to go get that one now because it just looks so much nicer than the floppy format.
I don't mind the floppy format. I just want it oversized. And Carmen is successful in being modern, 21st century kind of hipster story without ever being condescending. Yeah, it really did manage to. Because I have to say, going in, I didn't even put this on my pull list. I saw it was coming out. But the only thing I knew from Julian March was his covers for Catwoman and stuff like that. Sort of his, which I kind of liked and kind of found annoying. They were very kind of hipsterish to me. but in a way I found annoying. And I was just like, I was like, I don't know if I want a Julian Marsh comic. But then they had a shelf issue, and I flipped through it and went, oh, I like this art. And I took it home, and I'm really glad I gave it a try, because my initial impression of him from his DC Comics covers was kind of hipsterish annoying. So she died on the pole, so she was nude. Yeah.
Yeah, the Spanish edition is slightly larger than A4.
I want one of the, what are those Invincible Ultimate Collection sizes? That size that Image Comics often publishes their hardcovers at. Yeah, I won't be picking it up. I'm waiting for them to put it out at that size.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the absolute format.
Yeah.
Spanish edition is 12 by 9.
Hold on, let me.
Actually, I'm also a big fan of the artist edition format too.
Here we go. This is the size that Image publishes their hardcovers at, and this is the size I'd like to see Carmen at. Mm-hmm. Just not huge, not omnibus huge, but big enough to make a difference. But at least it wasn't oversized in the Amazon description I saw. Maybe they got it wrong.
Yeah.
Let's see. Gotham City Siren. Yeah. I didn't actually read Gotham City. I just saw the covers. I just saw a lot. And there's actually a book of his covers from like 2012, which I almost got a couple of times because I'm a sucker for books on comic book covers. The huge. Those are omnibus size. They're even bigger than those. That's about the European. I would like it at a European graphic album size even. Or that. Let me see what size is. Where's red one?
We like big books, and we cannot lie.
This is the Image European graphic album size. So this is even bigger than. So I'd like it at this size even. This is even bigger than their ultimate collections of stuff.
Yeah,
so I would.
It didn't come out like that in France.
What was that?
It didn't come out like that in France. So if the Spanish edition is the same as the French one, they're both 12 by 9.
Okay. Yeah, what size is this? This is 9 7/8 by 12 1/2. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty and this made all the difference for Red One. They put out 2 volumes of Red One in this size, and they put out what was that? Matt Fraction, Terry Dodson. Was it Terry Dodson who did that one too? Book. I forget the name of it, but they put out that one in this size too, and it made all the. I bought the first. This was only like 2 issues, which came out in this size, and I bought them and I enjoyed them. They were okay.
Who did the art on Red One?
What was that?
Who did the art on Red One?
This is Terry Dodson.
Okay.
This is Terry Dodson writing and art, and just the difference in reading it from this size. From the comic book size to this size was just so much better because this is really like a European graphic album with all the panels and stuff in it. It's not laid out like an American comic. It's laid out like a European graphic album. So it's really meant to be. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 panels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 panels. So it's really meant to be seen at this size, and it made such a difference. I really enjoyed reading it like this in a way I didn't at the smaller size.
Yeah, I prefer oversized books too.
Yeah.
That one's sad.
I still wish Seth's A Good Life if you don't weaken came out at regular comic size, because that's one that came out in that 6 by 9 size, even though it was printed in a regular comic.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
When I was in Charles Vesta's studio, he has not the Dark Horse versions, but I don't know what company printed them originally, but the versions of Lone Wolf and Cub, which are bigger than normal comic book size.
Yeah, those are ones in Japan.
And then I wanted to throw rocks at Dark Horse for shrinking it down.
Our friend Bunch,
Yeah.
who had all those Dark Horse volumes, I mean, all those Lone Wolf and Cub volumes before they even published them at Dark Horse. One time when he was working at DC, this was after his Marvel days, someone over there had the audacity to tell him that because when Dark Horse put those out, they put out the press release that they were always this is the size they were published in Japan, and so people believed it.
Yeah,
and people at DC tried to tell Bunch that, to which he immediately went back to his desk and got the original volumes and went, "Oh, really?"
Right.
And that's exactly why they didn't like him.
Instead of mic drop, yeah.
And that's exactly why they didn't like him over at Vertigo Comics, because he did not learn at that time. He didn't know at that time when someone asks him, when your boss asks you for your opinion, you're supposed to say, yeah, it's great, and not give them your actual opinion. So he was often in conflict with people at Vertigo because they'd ask him his opinion and he'd give it to them. And if it wasn't in agreement with theirs, they'd get upset with him.
Well, it's funny. It's, a lot of people, when you realize somebody's asking you a leading question, it pisses me off. Yeah. It's like, you're not asking me for my opinion. You're asking me for validation of what you're thinking.
When most people are asking you their opinion, especially at work, they just want encouragement.
Oh, and the other one that ticks me off is I heard this, and they'll come up with some outrageous rumor, which is what they want to exist. Mm-hmm. But they're framing it in, I heard a rumor, like, no, you didn't. You just thought that up 5 seconds ago.
They do. That's what they do on things like Fox News, is that they say, some people say that blah, 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 blah. And it's like, who says that?
Yeah, according to ancient astronaut theorists.
Right.
Well, who says that? They do.
That's the point. Is that that's what some people and nobody ever thinks to say, please cite your source.
Are they related to them, the giant ants?
Yes.
Well, they make more sense than you do.
To my earlier mention of Finding Bigfoot, when they had when they had the guy who was on it talking about Bigfoot, and they had under him Bigfoot behavioral expert.
Right.
Like, really?
What college did you get that degree from?
Yeah. How many subjects did you study?
Yeah.
You're an expert on Bigfoot behavior? Really?
Somebody spent a lot of time in the woods eating some mushrooms. Probably thinks they are a Bigfoot expert.
That's where the Bigfoot poop came from, was all those mushrooms.
I think there are mushrooms in it, if I remember correctly.
Probably.
But Portland, Maine, Cryptid Museum.
Cryptid Museum.
Yep. I was really upset when the town right next to the one where I grew up, they used to have one of those like a gift shop, but it had a back room with and it was obscure because nothing was for sale in the back room. It was like a cabinet of curiosities. So there were all these things in jars. That was mainly what was in there, were things in jars. And there were some cryptids, like there was a fake mermaid in there, like a sea monkey, and all kinds of
Steve Bissett has written some books about the cryptids in the state of Vermont where he lives.
Yeah. There's we actually have a stuffed and mounted jackalope head over our fireplace.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
Oh, I said we actually have a stuffed and mounted jackalope over our fireplace.
Right.
I was just rereading Comic Crack. Sounds like a good guy comment, which I think he made in reference to Bunch. Steve Bunch was one of those people who people don't know how important he was to the comics industry in like from like 1990 to 1995 or 96 when he was Google before there was Google.
Mm-hmm. He was the king of the bullpen.
He used to. I'll never forget this. He got fired in one of the bankruptcy downsizings, and they used to. What they would do when they fired you at Marvel during the bankruptcy downsizing is they'd escort you out, and then they'd ship all your stuff to you.
Wow.
And like I said, Bunch was Google before there was Google, in that people from far and wide, whenever any artist, writer, whoever, whenever they wanted to talk about something pop culture or something, would go over to Bunch's desk and see if he had, because he had everything on anime and manga and all that stuff before it even, back when it was Japanimation. Right. And before it was, so they'd be talking to him. He's like, "Oh, hold on, let me," and he pulled some reference book out, which he had near his desk.
Yep.
And they had to ship home when he had, there were the boxes that Xerox paper comes in.
Yeah.
He had 27 of them filled with his reference material at his desk that they had to ship to. After that, in the later bankruptcy firings, they no longer shipped your stuff home. You had to get it yourself.
So it probably cost them half a year of his normal salary to ship all the stuff to him.
But like he still knows everybody. I mean, he's one of these guys. After the Marvel bullpen, he worked at the DC Comics bullpen for a couple of years, and then moved into editorial in Vertigo. And so it's like he's got friends far and wide in the comics industry. He was one of these behind the scenes guys who just, in the early 90s especially, everybody, if you went to Marvel, you made a pilgrimage to his desk to talk about whatever obscure subject you were interested in.
It's interesting to talk about these people. Like you mentioned that, I think of, there's a term that some people are called nexuses, in terms of the amount of, I don't know if influence is probably not the right word, but the sphere of people they know and interact with.
Yeah, he's absolutely a nexus. He's like the hub of an enormous wagon.
I know that Rory Krinkle was like that to a lot of the artists that were coming up, like the 4 studio guys,
They have a lot of gravity.
He was like Google and the internet to introduce people to these, these illustrators that came years and years before, and did the same thing with Frank Frazetta.
Yeah. Certain people have a strong gravitational field.
Yep.
Yes, they do.
I remember my desk was right beside my desk was right beside Bunch's for a long time, and it was so great because every time a celebrity would turn up in the bullpen, they would invariably wind up at Bunch's desk, and I, being kind of a little bit of an introvert, I didn't have to participate in any conversation. I could just sort of sit there and eavesdrop on everything that was going on at his desk. It was wonderful.
Check cheerleader behavior experts.
Somewhere out there, is there a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader comic book?
Oh, if there isn't, there should be. Mm-hmm. Let's license that. There was NFL Super Pro.
Oh God!
I wonder if there was a tie-in with the Dallas
Cowboys.
Cowboys.
There was a guy I used to work with that was thoroughly convinced that Super Pro was going to be worth more money than any of the other comics in 20 years after that.
Hey, it was the early.
I would love to go back and say, you remember what you said about Super Pro? How did that turn out?
I'm just
got fading into the Super Bowl that year.
I was going to wonder what the plot of a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader comic would be, and then I was like, why would it need a plot? So never mind.
Well, if it was in the 80s, it would have been written by Bill Mantlo, because he wrote all the. It would be drawn by someone like Steve Leialoha.
It would actually probably be ghost drawn by someone like Don Simpson and published by Fantagraphics under their Arrows title.
A Jungle Girl Dallas Cowboys crossover we can get now from
dear Lord.
whatever that company is who made that comic I had last.
Don't give them ideas, Jared. Somebody's watching this like, that's brilliant. It'll be 50 different variant covers. And,
Yeah, it's in scope entertainment.
As long as they can draw an ass better than whoever drew that Jungle Girl comic.
So that's the
Sadly.
main is the.
I think everyone on the show has a solidly weak gravitational field. It's like we're always talking to all the same people on YouTube.
Yeah.
Our gravitational fields are intertwined, but they're not huge.
I have no gravitational field, and I'm okay with that. I think it would drive me. I have a friend who lives down in New Orleans, and she's kind of a local celebrity without even, just by being herself.
Right.
And, so she's got all kinds of people constantly following her around and wanting her attention. And all I can think of is what a pain in the ass that must be to live like that. It's just like, get off me.
Yeah.
With Gore's comment about the Alamo, you would have to have that cotemporous with the time when Ozzy Osbourne visited the Alamo and peed on it.
So you're looking for a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader story teamed up with Ozzy Osbourne.
I'm just saying those are the two. If you're going to include the Alamo, you kind of have to include that story.
Why not?
And then David Crockett shows up out of a time travel device and starts shooting people.
As long as they get somebody who can draw a horse, then
who would have been great to draw a crossover between the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders and it would have been Stephen Hughes.
Eric Powell could do it.
If it was a mainstream story, Adam Hughes. If it was a non-mainstream story, he's the Lady Death guy, right?
Yeah. And Evil Ernie too, wasn't he? He also did it. He was the other guy from Chaos Comics with Brian Pulido. Right.
Oh, Ernie Pulido?
I'd like to see Amanda Conner draw that crossover.
Oh, Amanda Conner could draw that, no doubt.
She could do a good job.
She can draw most things. Yeah, she's pretty good.
Yep. That's
then Jimmy Palmiotti would have to write it, and it would not be as funny.
Who would write it?
Well, there is that.
I think we're on to something here. I think we should license this.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sorry for even thinking of it in the first place, actually.
We'll license this. Gore Vidal can be credited as consultant. That means Gore Vidal needs to watch as many Dallas Cowboys games as he can.
I'm not sure I'd wish that on anybody.
First we do the official licensed version, and then we do the unlicensed parody version. That's a lot racier.
Mm-hmm.
Would we design the book like the way the Jungle Girl book is, where like we'd have one chapter where everybody's got clothes on, and then one chapter nobody's got any.
For the unlicensed parody version, that's the way we'll go.
Oh my God.
It'll be a flip book between naked and all the way naked.
Almost naked.
Do you remember when Marvel was going to do that naked Shanna the She-Devil book, but then they chickened out? That was the early 2000s.
I heard about it, but
was that the one that Frank Cho was drawing?
It's the Frank Cho one. Comic Crack wants to help Gore with the cheerleader research. Right off that plane trip to Dallas.
I don't think I've even seen Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders since the 70s.
I'm trying to remember. They're still at Cowboys games. I don't think they show them as much as they used to.
Why not?
I don't know. I'm thinking back to my watching Dallas Cowboys, because I catch the game against at least one game against the Giants. I probably see others. I'm trying to picture them going to or maybe they do it so often that I don't notice.
I just thought of a different crossover. And we have to do it in manga style.
Yeah. Anytime that you see the San Antonio Spurs on an NBA game, they always focus the cameras on the Riverwalk section of San Antonio. And you never see any of the rest of the city.
They like water in those NBA establishment shots. What crossover did you have there, Paolo?
It needs to be done in manga style. Harlem Globetrotters versus the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Oh.
Ooh.
Now that's gold right there.
That's a lot of characters. Only someone like George Perez can draw that one.
I'll make some comments on that once we get off the air.
I know.
Because there's some things there I don't know.
We're gonna have to get Brian Hitch and a lot of photo reference.
No. And what's the other guy they're always complaining about that traces everything? He did one of the covers for the Alien series compilations at Marvel recently, and everybody's like, no.
Everybody's been doing that.
It's going to drive me crazy to remember.
Like no one else. Well, that's what was that? Fine Young Cannibals? Driving them crazy.
I hate that song.
I think it's okay.
That voice is just so annoying.
Huh.
Yeah, I have a hard time processing falsetto. Unless it's yes.
False falsetto, even.
If we start a comic company called Gore Idea, people will expect horror from us.
Yeah.
That could be another in the series of the Dallas.
No. Since Gore lives in Texas, we could call it Gore/Tex, but then we'd have to license it.
Yeah, it's that's like mixing Tabasco sauce and wasabi and trying to license that name.
Hold on a second. I think I got it.
Uh-oh.
This will appeal to Texas. The Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders versus the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I could actually see somebody doing that. That sounds stupid enough to be done.
Yeah. Like their tour bus breaks down on the side of the road. And
there you go.
It writes
itself. It writes itself. After your highbrow.
Highbrow. Wait, would it be highbrow, lowbrow?
Highbrow, lowbrow.
Yeah.
And somewhere in rural Texas, there's a barbecue joint you really don't want to go to.
How could the Texas Chainsaw Massacre versus the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders be anything but highbrow? It's got no choice.
QED.
They'll even buy that up in Canada.
Talk to Jeff and see if he likes this idea.
Well, Jeff will be coming on sometime in the next 2 weeks to plug his. He's getting his Kickstarter started again. Robert Rodriguez directing. Yeah. Get Shaky Kane on the art.
Shaky Kane just sounds like a blues musician.
It does. He does.
Except he's missing the middle name. A lot of blues musicians have that middle name as Wayne or Lee or Roy or whatever it is. Kind of like serial killers. You always refer to them by all three names.
Shaky Joe Kane. Jojo Bad Eyes.
Well, I think they do that because that's how the police release their names.
Probably.
I remember reading something about that about Lee Harvey Oswald. That's how they release their names. That's what they end up being.
You could put any three names together and then say, is a blues musician or is a serial killer? I also want to trademark my $1 million idea that I thought of earlier.
Yeah.
There should be an app where you can take any movie quote and change the quote but the change that you make to it stays in the original actor's voice.
Invent that app and you'll make $1 million.
Seriously. How do you make money with? How in the world? How do you make money with that app?
You sell it for $1.
Advertising.
Oh,
or that.
Right. I keep forgetting about that.
Built-in ads.
Or you charge for individual voices. You want Morgan Freeman's voice?
Yeah.
That's 99 cents. You want imitation Tom Cruise's voice? That's 99 cents. You don't even have to get the real actor, just the imitator.
Of course, you'd have to pay to charge $99 if it was the real Tom Cruise voice.
Yeah. And if some guy who does impressions and voiceovers cut all the voices in one day and just keep raking in the money.
Of course, then with Tom Cruise, if you couldn't get permission or whatever to do it, you could just come up with the excuse of, well, we tried to get Tom Cruise, but we just came up short.
Oh.
Get me his non-union Mexican equivalent.
Was that a short joke?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. It was deliberate.
Okay, thank you.
We tried talking to him.
I love busting on Tom Cruise. Did you know?
I've never been accused of being someone. So.
Have you noticed that Tom Cruise has like one of his teeth is in the middle of his face? So like
I saw an article that somebody had brought that up at one time.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it. His teeth are like shifted half a space to one side. So like one of his front teeth, he's like Sigmund in the Sea Monsters, like it's just got the one tooth in the middle, and it's very distracting once you see it. I mean, I can't stand the guy anyway. I mean, I've heard he's very magnanimous to people he works with, but I'm sorry, the whole Scientology thing is just like.
I can't get mad at people believing crazy things. I'd be mad at everyone. Everybody believes crazy things.
Oh, people have been believing crazy things.
That doesn't mean I have to agree with Scientology hunting people down and ruining their lives, of course. But
no, and I'm not mad at him. He just annoys me.
I've never found Tom Cruise annoying.
Yeah, all right.
He's just kind of generic Hollywood star. His movies are okay.
I don't think he really has any acting range, but all right.
He does action movies. I like his the one based on the manga.
Oh yeah, the one they changed the name of the movie.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I can't remember it.
Oh, that's so annoying when you have something on the tip of your brain or the tip of your tongue and it just disappears. Yeah. Something
with tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's
not tomorrow more. That was just the recent Chris Pratt.
What was the title of the original manga?
You're not thinking of Minority Report.
No, I'm sorry.
Not thinking of Minority Report, are you?
No.
All you need is kill is the manga.
Right.
Oh.
Which is no wonder they changed the name. What the heck was the name of it? Oh well. Came out in like 2012. It's got Tom Cruise caught in a time loop fighting aliens.
Yeah. I remember they changed the name of the movie after it was released.
But this is really, if you ever get a chance to read All You Need Is Kill, it's good stuff.
Never heard of it, but I would.
I never heard of it either. I mentioned when I watched the movie like last year or the year before, and I posted about it on Facebook, and it was Oliver Kirby, friend of Bunches, who said, "Oh, if you like the movie, check out the manga. It's even better." And sure enough, I liked the manga even better. And it's just this one volume, so it's like a novel sort of thing. But it's about a guy caught in a time loop fighting aliens.
Interesting. Yeah, doesn't ring a bell, but that doesn't mean anything.
It was kind of one of the more minor Tom Cruise movies because it wasn't part of a series. You know, it wasn't in a franchise. So it kind of came. I mean, it wasn't a failure or anything, but it kind of came and went, and no one talked about it. I'm gonna have to look up the name. I have no choice.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I remember watching Vanilla Sky, and at the end of that one, I just had a massive eye roll. Like, didn't see that coming from 18 miles away.
Oh, I hate it when movies do that
Yeah, no, me too.
thing at the end. Oh, they drive me crazy.
Yep.
The Edge of Tomorrow. That's the name of it.
There you go. Never saw it.
Tom was good in Risky Business. The Edge of Tomorrow it's worth a look. It's a good, decent science fiction movie.
Okay.
The end is a little confusing, and they shot too much at the end in the dark, but the rest of it is real good.
Yeah, fair enough. It can't be worse than Flight 666, which we watched the other night.
Yeah, you horror fans watch a lot of bad movies.
It was literally the most exciting part about watching Flight 666 is that throughout the entire movie, the plane is flying through a thunderstorm, and there was a thunderstorm going on outside, like in real life at the time. So at one point while we were watching the movie, there's a huge crack of thunder. It happened. We were like, holy shit, do we have Dolby surround sound, or is that
Did they do any references to the classic Twilight Zone episode where there's a monster out on the wing?
Not there. I mean, there was a ghost out on the wing, but I don't think it was meant as a direct reference to that. It was too stupid.
Fair enough.
It was. I mean, it was one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. It was really boring.
You watched the wrong Flight 666. So there's also an Iron Maiden documentary called Flight 666.
Oh, now you see that I would watch.
That one's the one you should have watched.
Yeah, definitely.
As I look at this in front of me, I just realized that Terry Dodson might be one of these artists whose drawings have a lot of charm. I don't know if Daisy was here for that discussion one week.
Yeah.
You were? Yeah. I think he might be one of those like Terry Moore or Amanda Connor whose drawings have a lot of charm.
Yeah, I like the charming drawing style.
Terry Dodson reminds me a little bit if you took Phil Noto and crossed him with Alphonse Mucha.
And a lot of his covers these days are really Adam Hughes-ish too. He really has been more and more influenced by Adam
They
Hughes.
use a lot of those Art Nouveau framing elements too.
Yeah. Yeah. Terry Moore does that too.
Yeah, I'm really picky about that kind of like lifting the Art Nouveau border styles.
Me too.
It's so cliche that like
you
have to do it well for it to really work.
You know who does that? What I can't print. Oh God, I'm going to do a Tim thing here. Very subtly, subtle E.
Subtly,
it's so subtle that you don't notice it. Is Mike Kaluuya. He'll incorporate Art Nouveau things into his art, but you don't really notice it because he makes it his own.
Yeah, and that's really nice.
He's really good at it.
Do my drawings have charm also? Surreal charm? I think, now that you mention it, I think that there is some of like this one. I think something like this my drawings like this you might be able to say have a sort of surreal, not the sort of same charm that Terry Dodson or Terry Moore have, but I can see what you mean when you say that. There's an approachableness kind of to some of my stuff. But it's not in the same way that those guys. I think that there really is they do sleep. Like, this is the one I'm working on now.
The ones that you did of cats that I translated into embroidery patterns, the cat faces have charm. And I'd like to say I'm not a cat person, just generally. But
it's definitely a different type of charm than Terry Dodson.
Completely different art style, but somebody else with a charm like that is Fred Hembeck.
Yeah, because when you look at something like this, the charm, because what started this whole discussion of charm in drawings was somebody, maybe it was Mind the Comics, talking about how it would be easy to make like a Strangers in Paradise TV show, and then I was like, I'm not sure. You'd have to find some really charming actresses, like to make this woman come to life on a movie. You'd have to find a really charming actress in order to do that, and like it could really fall flat if you didn't get someone as charming as these drawings. But with like my stuff, you wouldn't even think about trying to cast it. That's why it would be charming in a surreal way, because you wouldn't compare them to like the real. No one would ever say Jared's drawing would make a good TV show. No one would think about translating my drawings into the real world. So it would be a different type of charm.
It's interesting that some artists translate easily into animation or live action, and there's some that don't. Right. Like I would imagine, and I've seen some, I'll get into that here in a minute, but like Mike Mignola is a good example of that. Mm-hmm. His stuff looks really good on a printed page, but that kind of slouch shoulder style that Hellboy has, it'd be awfully hard to do animated and make it look good. But I have seen a couple of fan base things that people did that actually look decent.
I would say, because Mike Mignola's drawing is so graphic designy and specific that all you have to do is change the angle on something, and all of a sudden you lose all the graphic design. So that's why it would be hard to animate. You would think it would be easy because the shapes are simple. Usually simple shapes are easier to animate.
Well,
there's so much graphic design.
There were 4 animated Hellboy movies that were done by Tad Stone, who also worked on Darkwing. But there was a much more cartoony style, you know.
Right.
But, when they did the animated version of The Amazing Screw-On Head, they did it faithfully to Mignola's art style.
Right.
And it worked. It's hard to do. And he says still to this day, Mike's never said he's seen it because he's too close to it.
Like even like here's the ink drawing of that painting I just did. Mm-hmm. Which has some charm to it. But as soon as you try to draw her at a 3/4 view, like you'd need for animation, you might lose the charm of it. Because there's so much graphic design in this drawing that might not exist when you change.
But if you took a Richard Corbin drawing and rotated it that much, it would still look exactly like Richard Corbin.
His stuff exists in a 3-dimensional space in his mind. Well, graphic design usually exists in a 2-dimensional space. Mm-hmm. So that would be interesting.
John Severin was like that too. His drawings had volume to them in that regard.
But like, you know, this, even though it exists in a 3-dimensional space, would still be hard to get an actress to have that much charm.
Right. Did you ever watch a black and white animated? Oh God, I just can't remember the title of it now. There's a black and white animated movie. It's called Renaissance. And Daniel Craig was the major voice actor in it, but it was all done in stark black and white animation, and it was realistic, and it looked fantastic. I mean, if you would cross Blade Runner with 40s noir, that's kind of what it would look like.
Ooh.
Okay. It's worth watching just to see the visual impact of it.
What's it called again?
Mm-hmm. Renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised.
Well, Paolo's just about fallen asleep, so we should end our show here.
Yeah, we stopped talking about the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders and he fell asleep.
He's been picturing them ever since. We can't wait for that head to hit the pillow. All right, so everybody out there, have a good night. Anybody have a last thought? All right, then.
No thoughts.
No.
We'll catch you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.